Chapter 1. Frigid Wind. Chapter 1. Frigid Wind. Prince 1 of Jianxing, Shen Wei's regiment suffered a crushing defeat at the Chasha River in the northeast. The prefecture of Duanzhou's front line fell into the enemy's hands, and 30,000 soldiers were buried alive in the Chasha sinkhole. You were among them, but why were you the only one to escape unscathed? Shen Zichuan's eyes were glazed and unfocused. He did not answer. The interrogator pounded on the table and leaned forward to question him with a malicious glare. Because Shen Wei was in covert communication with the 12 tribes of Bianxia too, and had the intention to present the 6 prefectures of Zhongbua over to our external foes. You people want to collude with the enemies to breach the defenses of Kudu from within and without. That's why the Bianxia cavalry did not kill you. Am I right? Shen Zichuan moved his dry, chapped lips. He struggled with some effort to listen to the interrogator's question. His Adam's apple throbbed as he answered haltingly. No, no. The interrogator snapped in a harsh voice. Shen Wei immolated himself for fear of punishment. The imperial bodyguards 3 have already presented correspondence documents of their secret liaisons to the emperor. And yet, lad, you still dare to deny it. How truly pig-headed of you! Shen Zichuan felt as if he was in a daze. He had no idea how long it had been since he had gotten some shut-eye. It was as if he was being suspended by a single thread high up in the air, and if he so much let go from a moment of negligence, he would fall and smash himself into smithereens. The interrogator spread open the confession statement and took a few glances at it. You said last night that you were able to emerge unscathed from the Chasha sinkhole alive because your elder brother saved you. Is that right? The scene that day vaguely materialized before Shen Zichuan's eyes. They had been trapped so deep in the sinkhole that no matter what they did, they were unable to climb out, even with countless soldiers all crammed within. The pile of corpses under their feet grew thicker and thicker, but it was still not enough for them to reach the edge of the opening. The Bianxia cavalry surrounded the sinkhole, and the sound of flying arrows slicing through the frigid wind pierced through the night. Blood overflowed his calf as anguished wails and the gasps of those on their deathbed clung to his ears. Shen Zichuan began to hyperventilate and tremble in his seat. He lost control of himself and clutched his hair, unable to stop a strangled sob from escaping his throat. You are lying. The interrogator raised the confession statement and flicked it at Shen Zichuan. Your elder brother is Shen Zhouji, the eldest lawful son of the Prince of Jianxing. He abandoned 30,000 soldiers before the Chasha sinkhole and fled on the sly with his own private soldiers, but the Bianxia cavalry lassoed him with a rope and dragged him along the road by the Chasha River to his death. He was already dead by the time the 12 tribes of Bianxia slaughtered those soldiers. There was no way he could save you. Shen Zichuan's mind was in a whirl. The interrogator's voice sounded so far away, and all he could hear was the never-ending wails. Where is the way out? Where are the reinforcements? The dead pushed against the dead. Those putrid, decaying flesh was pressing down on his hands. Mu Ji was shielding him above his head while he laid sprawled over the bloodied carcasses. He listened to Mu Ji's rapid breathing, yet the cries that emerged from his throat were those of despair. Your bro is superhuman. Ji Mu struggled to smile, but tears were already streaming down his face. He continued in a sobbing voice, I'm an impregnable fortress. I'm hanging in there, it'll be fine. We hang in there, and the reinforcements will arrive soon. When that time comes, I'll return home with you to join father and mother. I still have to look for your sister-in-law. The interrogator banged the table and bellowed, Come clean with it! Shen Zichuan began to struggle. He looked as if he wanted to break free from some invisible shackles, but the imperial bodyguards swarmed over and pinned him down against the table. You are in our imperial prison. 5. I have not employed extreme torture on you on account of your young age. But since you don't know what's good for you, don't blame us for being ruthless. Men, apply the torture. Shen Zichuan's arms were tied with ropes before he was dragged to the open space in the room. Someone set a bench down with a clatter and bound his legs to it. A burly man beside him lifted his flogging rod, weighed it in his hands, and swung it down. "I'll ask you one more time." The interrogator brushed aside the foam on the tea with the teacup's lid. It was only after he took a few languid sips that he asked, "Did Shun Wei collude with the enemy to commit treason?" Shun Zichuan refused to relent. He shouted intermittently between the flogging. "No, no." The interrogator set aside the teacup. "The Shun clan would not be here today if you had used this fortitude on the battlefield. Continue to flog him." Shun Zichuan was gradually crumbling. He hung his head and said in a hoarse voice, "Shen Wei never colluded with the enemies. We suffered a crushing defeat at the battle at the Chasha River, all because Shen Wei recklessly fought the enemy head-on. After the defeat at the Chasha River, there was still a chance to redeem the situation at the Dunzhou front line. Yet he withdrew his troops for no reason despite the great disparity of power between our troops and theirs. Because of this, the 3 cities of the prefecture of Duanzhou fell into the enemy's hands. 10 of thousands of commoners in those cities lost their lives to the Biancha machetes." At this point, the interrogator let out a long sigh and continued hatefully. "It was a bloodbath in the 6 prefectures of Zhonghua. Shen Wei led his troops and withdrew south. The battle in the prefecture of Dengzhou was the fishiest of all. The Qidong Qijun commandery garrison had already crossed Tianfei watchtower to provide assistance, but he forsook the strategy of a pincer attack and instead mobilized thousands of cavalry to escort his own family to the city of Danqing. This resulted in the entire line of defense in the prefecture of Dengzhou to collapse. Wasn't this all done intentionally? If it weren't for the Libei armored cavalry 6 galloping for 3 straight nights across the river of Ice 7, the Biancha cavalry would have already arrived at the gates of Kudu. Shun Zichuan felt dizzy, and he was drenched in cold sweat. The interrogator flung the confession at him in contempt, and it smashed into the back of his head. "You'd rather be a dog than a man of Zhonghua. And this time, Shen Wei is a sinner of Dazhou. Ain't you still want to deny it? You have no choice but to plead guilty." Shun Zichuan was in so much pain that half of his body was numbed. He sprawled on the bench, looking at that confession before his eyes. The ink writings on it were clear. Every character was like a humiliating lash of the whip on his face as it announced to everyone in the world, Shen Wei betrayed his country. He's not even worthy to be a dog. He had left the 6 prefectures of Zhonghua to overrun with bodies. No one had even gone to collect those corpses buried in the Chasher sinkhole yet, because everyone in the cities of Dunzhou had been massacred. Shen Wei burned himself to his death, but this blood-stained debt had to be borne by someone alive. Shen Wei had a harem of wives and concubines along with numerous sons. But they all perished when the Biancha cavalry invaded the prefecture of Dunzhou. It was only because Shun Zichuan was of lowly birth and had been raised on the outside that he could escape unscathed. Shun Zichuan was dragged back to his cell, and his heels left behind trails of blood in its path. He faced the wall and gazed at that small, narrow window. The frigid wind howled and the snow came pelting down. The pitch-black night stretched on without end. It was primal chaos in his head. Amidst the sound of the winds, his mind wandered back to the sinkhole. Jimu was dying. His breathing had grown labored. Blood dripped down his armor onto the back of Shun Zichuan's neck and quickly turned icy. The wails around him had vanished, leaving behind only the unendurable groans of pain and the bellows of the frigid, biting wind. Shun Zichuan was face to face with a dead man who was no longer recognizable. His legs were pinned under heavy human bodies while a shield was pressing painfully against his abdomen. All he could smell as he breathed was the thick stench of blood. He gritted his teeth as the tears trickled down his face, but he had to stop himself from crying out loud. Despairing, he stared down at this face that was trampled beyond recognition, but he could not make out if this was a soldier he had seen before. "Bro." Shun Zichuan sobbed softly. I'm scared," Ji Mu's throat bobbed. He gently patted Shun Zichuan's head, It's all right, we'll be fine. Shen Zichuan heard the singing of the soldiers at death's door. The gale tore apart the sound of the song and sent tattered pieces of it fluttering away into this frigid night. Battle in the city south. Death at the north of the city wall. Left out in the open, unburied. Free for all the crows to feed. 9 bro. Shen Zichuan whispered beneath him. I'll carry you on my back, bro. Ji Mu's body was like a distorted shield. He smiled and said in a hoarse voice, I can walk on my own. Were you struck by an arrow? No. Ji Mu's tears had dried up. He said breezily, those Biancha baldies can't shoot for nut. Shen Zichuan's fingers were soaking in flesh and blood. With some difficulty, he wiped his face. Shenyang made dumplings. Once we return home, we'll eat many bowls of it. Ji Mu sighed. Bro is a slow eater. Don't snatch. Shen Zichuan gave a firm nod beneath him. The snow gradually blanketed Ji Mu's body. He seemed tired and sleepy. His voice was so small, and he did not even have the energy to move his fingers. The song was sung very slowly, and when it reached the line, the valiant cavalry perished in battle. Ji Mu closed his eyes. Shen Zichuan said, I'll also give bro my money, to marry sister-in-law. Bro. Ji Mu remained silent. It was as if he was tired of listening to his words, and could not help but fall asleep. Shen Zichuan began to tremble all over. He forgot when the Biancha cavalry left, and how he climbed his way out. When he propped himself up and lifted himself out, there was only a dead silence amidst the heavy snow. The stacked corpses cushioned under his knees all looked like discarded burlap sacks. Shen Zichuan looked back and began to choke with sobs. Ji Mu's back had been pierced with such a dense cluster of arrows that his entire person had turned into a twisted hedgehog. So much of his blood had trickled down onto Shen Zichuan's back, but Shen Zichuan had never realized it. The sound of horse hooves came swiftly in pursuit like the looming thunder. Shen Zichuan suddenly gave a start as he jolted awake. He felt like retching, but then he realized that both of his wrists had been firmly bound, and there was a burlap sack filled with soil on his body. The sack became heavier and heavier as it weighed down on his chest. He could not even utter a sound. This was the technique of inflicting death by crushing with an earth-filled sack, habitually used in prisons on prisoners whom they did not want to survive the murder attempt or leave a trace of an injury behind. If Shen Zichuan had not woken up earlier, he would have been but a mere corpse gone cold by daybreak. Someone wants to kill him. Chapter 2. Death by Flogging. Chapter 2. Death by Flogging. It was gloomy inside the imperial prison. Shen Zichuan's hands and legs felt cold. He was beginning to find it hard to breathe. He kept twisting his wrists, but the hemp rope was so tightly secured around him that his attempts were futile. The sack of earth was squashing down on his chest, making him feel as if he had been thrown into a deep pool. His ears were humming and his breathing disordered. It was so hard for him to continue breathing that it felt like he was drowning. Shen Zichuan turned his eyes to stare at the candlelight beyond the bars. Several imperial bodyguards in the hall were drinking and shouting as they played the finger-guessing game. They were simply too occupied to look back at Shen Zichuan. The sack of soil nailed Shen Zichuan down onto a crudely made straw mat. Nausea, stemming from the suffocation, engulfed him like a surge of floodwater. His vision swam. Shen Zichuan raised his head high and gritted his teeth to move his legs. Both his legs had been flogged until they were near numb. He felt nothing when he raised them. He stepped on the left corner of the bed made up of wooden plank. It was already rotting from bug infestation. In fact, he had even damaged it a little by sitting down on it on his very first day here. His breathing grew labored. Shen Zichuan stepped on that corner and stomped down on it with all his strength. But his legs were so weak that his kick did not even make a sound. The bed plank did not budge even the slightest. Cold sweat streamed down in torrents until the clothes on his back were soaked through. He yearns to live. Frantic whimpers escaped from Shun Zichuan's throat. He bit down on his tongue until it bled and stomped down again on the bed plank. Ji Mu's brutalized and barely recognizable corpse was the horsewhip igniting his desire to live. Ji Mu's voice seemed to be still reverberating in his ears. He must live. Shun Zichuan struck that wooden plank furiously until he finally heard a thud. Half of the bed board collapsed, and his body fell over on his side. The sack of soil tumbled down after him. He threw himself onto the ground as if he had just broken through the water surface and sucked in big mouthfuls of air. The ground was icy cold. Shun Zichuan's injured legs would not heed his commands, so he propped himself up with his elbows. Sweat trickled down the bridge of his nose. It was cold in prison, but he felt as if his whole body was burning. It was so searing that his insides were boiling. Eventually, he could not help but lower his head to dry heave. Shen Wei deserves to die. There were 120,000 military forces in Zhongbua, divided among the 6 prefectures to establish a defensive perimeter. After the defeat at Chaosha River, the Biancha cavalry invaded Dunzhou. Just as the interrogator had said, there was still a chance to redeem the situation. Shun Wei not only had a well-trained and powerful army, he also had ample army provision. There were also the garrison troops in the 3 cities of Duanzhou available for his deployment. Yet, he unexpectedly abandoned Duanzhou and shrank back like a coward to hide out in the Dunzhou prince's residence. His retreat was the prelude to the fall of Zhongbua. The Biancha cavalry massacred the 3 cities of Duanzhou, and the morale of the garrison troops took a nosedive. They fled south in a panic. Everyone thought that Shen Wei would battle to the death with the 12 tribes of Biancha in Dunzhou. But he took to his heels yet again when he caught wind of the news of their arrival. The Zhongbua army retreated in defeat one battle after another, while the Biancha cavalry was like a steel blade in its full glory perforating through the 6 prefectures' territories. They came spurring their horses on and traveled light into battle, relying solely on their spoils of war to pursue their way within 800 li one of Kudu, the imperial capital city of Dazhou. If Shun Wei had implemented the scorched earth policy during his retreat and burned down the granaries in the city so that nothing was left behind for the enemies, then there would have been no way the Biancha cavalry would advance this far. This was because they carried no army supplies with them and had to rely solely on the grains from the cities they had invaded to replenish their provisions. Once the grains in the city had been wiped out with fire, even the toughest Biancha cavalry would have to go hungry. A starving soldier would have been unable to continue fighting. When the time comes, the Libei armored cavalry would have crossed the river of ice to intercept the Biancha 12 tribes' retreat, while the Qidong 5 commandery garrisons would, from the Tianfei watchtower, seal off all their possible escape routes. Those machetes would then be trapped like turtles in a jar. They would never survive the winter. But Shen Wei did not do so. He did not just give up resisting. He also left all the granaries in the city to the Biancha cavalry. The Biancha cavalry relied on the Dazhou's provisions to carry out a massacre of Dazhou's cities. Thanks to Shen Wei, their horses were well fed enough to herd the common folks and captured soldiers to the Chaosha River, where they were all slaughtered by the Biancha cavalry in one night. Shun Zichuan had a very close call with death. And now, Kudu wanted to settle accounts. It was obvious that Shen Wei's deployment orders, while he was still alive, were all sloppily made. It did indeed seem like he was colluding with the Biancha 12 tribes to launch an attack from within and without. Yet, Shen Wei's immolated himself due to fear of punishment and burned himself to death, destroying all the documents along with him. Even the imperial bodyguards, who were effective and efficient in their duties, were now at their wits' end. The emperor wanted to get to the bottom of the matter, so all they could do was to keep on interrogating the only remaining person who might be in the know, Shun Zichuan. But Shun Zichuan's biological mother was a dancer in Duanzhou. Shun Wei had too many sons, and Shun Zichuan was his 8th son born to a concubine. 2. There was really no place for him in the clan going by his age or rank. So he had long been driven out by the Dunjo prince's residence to Duanzhou to be raised without parental guidance. Shenwei himself probably did not even remember he still had this son. Someone wants to kill him. That was not exactly a secret. He had been sent here to be a scapegoat for his father. He was the last remaining member of the Shin clan in Zhonghua, and the son was obliged to pay his father's debts. So once the interrogation in the imperial prison was concluded, the emperor would surely use his life to offer as a sacrifice during the memorial for the 30,000 soldiers who were killed at the Chaosha River in Zhonghua's Dunzhou prefecture. Even so, it should not be through an assassination like this. Shen Zichuan wiped the corner of his lips with his thumb and turned his head to spit out the spittle of blood in his mouth. If Shenwei had indeed conspired with their foreign enemies with the intention to commit treason, then Shen Zichuan would have to die sooner or later. Why make an unnecessary move to assassinate an insignificant bastard born of a concubine like him? There was still someone in the capital worried about the interrogation. If that was the case, then there must have been something shady about the defeat of Shenwei's troops. Shen Zichuan knew nothing. He had a Shifu in Duanzhou, and his brother, Ji Mu, was his Shifu's only son. To him, Shenwei was merely the prince of Jianxing, who had nothing to do with him. He had absolutely no idea if Shenwei had conspired with the enemies, but he must deny it. The ground that Shen Zichuan was sprawled on was so bone-chillingly cold that he was even more awake than he had been during the day. He was a felon the imperial bodyguards arrested on the orders of the imperial edict. All arrest warrants, writs of summons, and official rulings came directly from the top. It brought him directly from the hands of Xiao Jiming, the hereditary prince III of Libei, right to the imperial prison, bypassing even the joint trial of the 3 judicial offices. For this was clearly an indication of the emperor's unrelenting determination to never condone this and to get to the bottom of the matter. But, under this kind of situation, who would have the guts to make such a reckless move to silence him before the emperor could personally interrogate him? The cold wind was still howling at the window. Shen Zichuan turned his eyes and stared at the wall in the dark. He did not dare to close them again. The weather was slightly cool the next day. Shen Zichuan was brought back to the hall again. A snowstorm raged outside. The interrogator who had been cold towards him the other day was now smiling as he served tea with both hands and waited with deference at the side of the classical-styled, wooden chair. There was an old, fair-faced, and beardless eunuch sitting on the seat. He was wearing the official hat of the eunuchs made of velvet for the wintry season, with an gourd patterned 5 Mandarin square 6 on his robe. His cloak was still draped over him, and he was holding a precious, exquisite plum blossom hand warmer as he rested his mind. He listened to the movements, then opened his eyes to look at Shen Zichuan. Godfather Ji Lei, who was acting on the imperial edict to interrogate Shen Zichuan, stooped over to say, "This is the surviving descendant of the prince of Jianxing, Shen Wei." Pan Rugi looked at Shen Zichuan and asked, "How did it come to this?" Ji Lei was aware that Pan Rugi was not asking him why Shen Zichuan had ended up all filthy and stinky, but why he had yet to pry the whys and wherefores out of Shen Zichuan. Ji Lei's forehead was drenched in sweat, but he did not dare to wipe it away. He maintained his bow and responded, "This lad is ignorant. He has been delirious ever since we brought him back from Zhonghua. We don't know who put him up to it, but he has been refusing to confess. A wanted felon His Majesty ordered to arrest." Pan Rugi did not accept the tea offered. A child of 15 or 16 of age, who was sent to the famous imperial prison to be personally interrogated by you, His Excellency G. And yet you still can't even hand over a confession statement. Cupping the teacup in his hands, Ji Lei said with a bitter smile, "It's precisely because of that I do not dare to employ the tortures without authorization." He was already suffering from a cold when he arrived. If he dies because we did not hold back on the torture, then this case of Shun Wei would end up as a cold case. Pan Rugi scrutinized Shin Zichuan for a moment and said, "We are all our master's dogs. There's no point in keeping a dog if its fangs are no longer sharp. I know you have your own difficulties, but this is all part of your duties. His Majesty wants to see him now. This is his way of showing understanding and consideration for the imperial bodyguard. How could you still gripe about it?" Ji Lei hurriedly prostrated himself in obeisance and said, "Godfather is right. This son has been duly castigated." Pan Rugi gave a snort of acknowledgement and said, "Clean him up. He can't seek an audience with His Majesty with how filthy he looks." Shen Zichuan was taken by the errand runner to wash up and have the injuries on his thigh simply bandaged before he was given a set of clean cotton attire to put on. He was at their mercy as they ordered him about. He was too indisposed to walk. It even took him some effort to climb onto the horse carriage. Pan Rugi finally accepted Ji Lei's tea. He stared at Shin Zichuan's back and said, "He's really the last surviving member of the Shin clan?" Ji Lei answered, "That's right. He is the only survivor from the Chashire sinkhole. The hereditary prince Shao of Libei personally took him under arrest. All this while, he has been detained in the prisoner wagon of the Libei armored cavalry. No one has ever touched him on the way here." Pan Rugi sipped his cold tea. After a long time, he gave a skin-deep smile and said, "Hereditary Prince Shao is a prudent man." Shin Zichuan got off the carriage and let the imperial bodyguards carry him along a long path. The heavy snow blew onto his face. The internal eunuch leading the way hurried along without uttering a word of nonsense. The junior eunuch waiting respectfully under the eaves came forth to receive Pan Rugi when the latter arrived before Mingli Hall. He removed the cloak for Pan Rugi, helped him change the outer layer of his robe, and then took over the hand warmer in Pan Rugi's hands. They had already announced his arrival inside. Pan Rugi kowtowed by the door and said, "Your Majesty, this slave 7 has brought the man." A short while later, a low and unhurried voice rang out, "Bring him in." Shen Zichuan's breathing hitched. They had already supported him in. There was incense burning inside, but it was not stifling hot. He listened to the sounds of intermittent coughs as he swept his gaze out of the corner of his eye and caught a glimpse of 2 feet inside the hall. Emperor Xiando was dressed in a dark navy blue common robe. He was skinny to the point of being bony, and his body was frail. Major and minor illnesses had never stopped plaguing him in the 3 years he had ascended to the throne. He sat on the throne, his rectangular face looking particularly gentle and delicate due to his anemic-looking complexion. Ji Lei has been trying him for several days. Emperor Xianda glanced at Ji Lei, who was kneeling at the back. "Has a conclusion been reached?" Ji Lei kowtowed and said, "To reply His Majesty, this lad's words are incoherent and full of loopholes. Everything he has confessed these few days is contradictory and cannot be believed." Emperor Xianda said, "Present all those he has confessed to me." Ji Lei took out the tidied-up confession statement from his bosom and handed it with both hands to Pan Rugi. Pan Rugi hurried forward again and respectfully presented it to Emperor Xianda. Emperor Xianda looked through it once. When he reached the part about Chashire sinkhole, he covered his mouth and started coughing. He refused to let Pan Rugi wipe it for him. Instead, he wiped off the blood between his lips himself with a handkerchief. He said in a heavy voice, 30,000 soldiers lost their lives at the sinkhole, but not Shin Wei. This truly makes one's blood boils." Shen Zichuan closed his eyes, and his chest began to pound. Sure enough, the next moment, he heard Emperor Xianda's orders. "Raise your head." Shen Zichuan's breathing quickened. His palms on the ground that were propping himself up felt icy cold. He raised his head slowly, his eyes carefully landing on Emperor Xianda's boot. Emperor Xianda looked at him and asked, "You are Shin Wei's son and the only survivor of the Chashire sinkhole. What do you have to say?" Shen Zichuan's eyes reddened. His body trembled ever so slightly as he sobbed and said nothing. Without a change in expression, Emperor Xianda demanded, "Answer me." Shen Zichuan suddenly raised his eyes. The tears trickled down along his cheeks. He raised his eyes for a fleeting moment, then kowtowed hard onto the ground. His shoulders trembled, and spasmodic sobs in his throat rose along with the trembling. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty! My father is loyal to the country." He was too ashamed to face the country and the elders of Zhongbua after the defeat of his troops. That's why he immolated himself to atone for it. Emperor Xianda rebuked, "What nonsense are you spouting? If he was that devoted to the country, why would he keep retreating?" Shen Zichuan's voice was hoarse from his sobbing. "My father sent all his sons onto the battlefield. My eldest brother, Shen Zhouji, was tortured to death by those Bianxia people who dragged him behind a horse along the Chashur public route. If it were not for his loyalty, how would he have been able to go to such an extent?" Emperor Xianda said, "How dare you bring up the Chashur battle?" Shen Zhouji fled before the battle. "His crime is unpardonable." Shen Zichuan looked up at Emperor Xianda with tears streaming from his eyes. He said in a raspy voice, "The battle at Chashur was a bloodbath. My eldest brother may be muddle-headed and incompetent, but he defended Chashur for 3 days. It was within these 3 days that the military intelligence of the war situation was delivered to Qidong and Li Bei. If it weren't for these 3 days..." He was so choked with emotions that he could not continue. Emperor Xianda looked at the confession in his hand. The entire hall was silent except for the sounds of Shen Zichuan's sobs. Amidst this excruciatingly long silence, Shen Zichuan dug his fingernails into his flesh. Emperor Xianda suddenly gave a long sigh and asked, "Has Shen Wei ever colluded with the enemies?" Shen Zichuan's answer was resolute and decisive. "Never." Unexpectedly, Emperor Xianda set down the confession and said in a voice that had abruptly turned cold, "This boy is cunning and harbors the intent to deceive the ruler. I must not allow you to live. Pan Rugi, drag him away and flog him to death at the gates of Duanqing." This slave obeys. Pan Rugi immediately received his orders and bowed to retreat. Shen Zichuan felt cold all over as if he had been doused with a basin of icy water. He suddenly put up a struggle, but the imperial bodyguards covered his mouth and swiftly dragged him out of Mingli Hall. Chapter 3 Raptor Chapter 3 Raptor Pan Rugi strode towards the gate of Duanqing. The imperial bodyguards' commandants split into 2 rows flanking each side and stayed as silent as winter cicadas. Once Pan Rugi came to a halt and announced Emperor Xianda's verbal edict, the imperial bodyguards began their work. The imperial bodyguards gagged Shen Zichuan and swiftly wrapped him up in a thick cotton-padded garment before they made him lie face down on the ground. Pan Rugi leaned over in the cold wind to observe Shen Zichuan's state. He raised his fingers to cover his lips feebly and coughed a few times before he said softly, "You are so young, and yet you are so gutsy that you dare to put on such a melodramatic display before His Majesty. If you had just truthfully confessed Shen Wei's crime of treason, you might still have a slim shot at survival." Shen Zichuan shut his eyes tightly. Cold sweat had already soaked through his clothes. Pan Rugi rose to his feet and said, "Start flogging." The imperial bodyguards' commandants on both sides immediately shouted in unison, "Let the rod fall." A thunderous roar followed right after. Hit! Before the words were fully out of their mouths, the rod wrapped in an iron sheet with barbs came whistling down on Shen Zichuan and dealt him a heavy blow. After 3 strikes, he heard another voice. "Hit him hard." The pain of his flesh was like a searing fire blazing through his body. They hit Shen Zichuan until he could no longer move. All he could do was to clamp his teeth down tightly on the gag in his mouth. He was unable to swallow his blood in time, and its coppery and salty taste saturated his mouth. Shen Zichuan was still hanging on to his last breath as the dripping sweat stung his wide-open eyes. The sky was overcast, and the heavy snow fell like willow catkins. Flogging was not a job anyone could do. As the saying, faint at 20 strokes, lame at 50, suggested, there were many ways to flog a man. It was generally a family craft handed down through the generations, and was no less easier to train than learning a trade elsewhere. Moreover, this job did not just require one to have good martial arts skills, but also a discerning eye. These floggers had been doing this for so long that all they had to do is to look at the expressions of these great eunuchs from the ceremonial directorate one to know who should receive superficial wounds but serious internal injuries, and vice versa. Emperor Xianda's decree today was death by flogging, and Pan Rugi did not seem to value him either. That meant there was no way an about turn would happen. He was a man who had to die. So these imperial bodyguards brought out their special skills. Within 50 strokes, Shen Zichuan must die. Pan Rugi kept an eye on the timing and noticed that Shen Zichuan had already gone motionless with his head drooping. He raised his hand over the hand warmer and was about to give his instructions when he saw an umbrella floating towards them on the path. A beauty in royal garb stood underneath. The dark clouds on Pan Rugi's face dispersed in a flash and transformed into a smile. Although he did not personally step forward in a greeting, the quick-witted eunuch beside him had already gone over to offer her his arm in support. My sincere respects to Third Missy. It's such a cold day. If Her Majesty the Empress Dowager has any instructions, you can just send someone to pass the message. Pan Rugi spoke as he took 2 steps closer. Hua Xiangyi raised her hand lightly to motion to the imperial bodyguards not to move. She was delicate and beautiful. All these years, the Empress Dowager had kept her by her side to nurture her. Her facial features resembled those of the Empress Dowager when the latter was young. Although she went by the address of the third Missy of the Diqing Hua clan in Kudu, everyone knew she was a distinguished lady of the palace. Even the emperor doted on her like his own dear little sister. Hua Xiangyi said in a slow and soft voice, "Gonggong, is the one sprawled on the ground the son of Zhongbua Shen clan, Shen Zichuan?" Pan Rugi moved in tandem with Hua Xiangyi's steps and replied, "That's the one. His Majesty has just issued the decree to flog him to death." Hua Xiangyi said, "His Majesty was in a fit of anger earlier. If Shen Zichuan were to die, then we'll never get to the bottom of Shen Wei's treason." Her Majesty the Empress Dowager had arrived at Mingli Hall half a quarter to ago. His Majesty heeded her advice and has since calmed down some. Pan Rugi let out an "oh my" and said, "His Majesty always listens to Her Majesty the Empress Dowager's counsel." He was in such a terrible rage earlier that I did not dare to say a word even if I had a mind to. Hua Xiangyi smiled at Pan Rugi and said, "His Majesty said to flog him. Isn't that what you did?" Pan Rugi took a few more steps and smiled too. "That's right. I was in such a hurry earlier when I heard the word flog and gave this lad a good beating. May I know how we should deal with him now?" Hua Xiangyi swept a glance at Shen Zichuan and said, "Before His Majesty's retrial, drag him back to the imperial prison first. The child's life is of utmost importance. I'm counting on Gonggong to inform His Excellency Ji to take good care of him by all means." "That goes without saying," Pan Rugi said. "How would Ji Lei dare to turn a deaf ear to Third Missy's exhortations? The weather is cold and the roads are slippery. Xiaofuzi, hold Third Missy steady." As soon as Hua Xiangyi left, Pan Rugi turned back and said to the 2 rows of imperial bodyguards, "His Majesty said to flog. We are about done hitting this person. Drag him back. You've heard Third Missy's words earlier. That's Her Majesty the Empress Dowager's wish. Return and inform Ji Lei that all the people involved in this case are immortals. 3. If something were to happen to the lad under his watch," Pan Rugi coughed slowly, "even the Jade Emperor for himself wouldn't be able to protect that head of his." Xiaofuzi returned to help support Pan Rugi by the arm. The long and wide stretch of road was empty. He whispered, "Forefather, 5 we let him go just like this. Will His Majesty the Emperor really not blame us later?" Pan Rugi stepped on the snow and said, "His Majesty knows deep down that we can't be faulted for this." He walked a few steps. Snowflakes squeezed their way into his fur collar. A promise is worth 1,000 ounces of gold. A sovereign fears backpedaling on his words the most. His Majesty suffered another bout of serious illness due to the invasion of the Biantia 12 tribes. These days, he has been considering conferring a princess title on 3rd Missy to please Her Majesty the Empress Dowager. At this point in time, His Majesty will have to acquiesce even if Her Majesty the Empress Dowager were to make other demands of him, let alone to spare a man's life. As he spoke, Pan Rugi inclined his head to look at Xiaofuzi. "When have you ever seen Her Majesty the Empress Dowager change her orders?" Regardless of which case it was, the real master was the one who stood by his or her own word. Shun Zichuan was delirious with fever. One moment, he saw Ji Mu dying before him. The next moment, he saw himself while he was still living in Duanzhou. The wind of Duanzhou caressed its way past the banner. Shenyang raised the curtain to step out with a white porcelain bowl in her hand. It was filled with dumplings that had thin skins and a large portion of fillings. "Tell your bro to come home," Shenyang called out to him. "He can't even sit still for a moment. Get him to hurry back for his meal." Shen Zichuan climbed over the corridor's railing, took a few steps over to his Shenyang, and bit the dumpling off the chopsticks before running off. The dumpling was so scalding that he kept huffing through his mouth. As he went out of the door, he saw his Shifu, Ji Gang, sitting on the stairs. Thus, he squatted beside him. Ji Gang was grinding a rock with his hands. He turned his head to harumph at Shun Zichuan and said, "Silly lad, how much is a dumpling worth? Look at how much of a rarity you treat it as. Go call your bro back. The 3 of us father and sons will go to Yuanyang Tavern for a big meal." Shun Zichuan did not continue the conversation, because Shenyang was already pulling at Ji Gang's ear. She said, "Turning your nose up at dumplings, huh? How capable of you! Do you really have the money to get yourself another wife? Going over yourself with these 2 silly lads in tow, Shun Zichuan laughed out loud. He leaped down the stairs and waved to his Shifu and Shenyang before he ran out to the alley to look for his brother, Ji Mu. It was snowing heavily along the way. Shun Zichuan could not find him. The more he walked, the further he went, and the colder he became. "Bro!" Shun Zichuan dashed all over the place, shouting, "Ji Mu! Let's go home for our meal." Gradually, the sound of horse hooves surrounded him. The heavy snow obstructed his view. Shun Zichuan was deeply entrenched in the sound of horse hooves, yet he could see no one around. The sound of fighting erupted in his ears, and warm blood splattered over his face. There were stabs of pain in both of Shun Zichuan's legs as an overwhelming force pinned him down onto the ground. He saw the dead man close before him again. The rain of arrows whistled in the wind. The man on his back was heavy, and that sticky and warm liquid trickled down along his neck, along his cheek. This time, he knew what it was. Shun Zichuan woke up trembling. He was drenched in sweat, and it was so freezing that he shivered uncontrollably. He sprawled over the bed plank as his eyes adjusted with some difficulty to the darkness. There were still people in the prison room. The errand runner cleared away the filthy items and lit the oil lamp. Shun Zichuan felt parched. The errand runner seemed aware of his thirst and poured a bowl of cold water for him before setting it on the bed plank. Waves of hot and cold washed over Shun Zichuan. Very slowly, he nudged the bowl over to himself, spilling half of the water in it. No one spoke in the prison. Shun Zichuan was the only one left after the errand runner withdrew. He slipped in and out of consciousness. This night seemed to drag on endlessly. No matter how he waited, dawn never came. The errand runner came again to change Shun Zichuan's medicine. He was already a lot more sober. Ji Lei looked at him beyond the bars and said in a cold voice, "You are one lucky bastard. A scourge truly never dies. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager spared your life. I suppose you don't know why. Shen Zichuan lowered his head and said nothing. Ji Lei said, I know your Shifu is Ji Gang, the fugitive Ji Gang of the martial fraternity. I was fellow disciples with him 20 years ago. Together, we served as the imperial bodyguards in Kudu. I'm afraid you don't know this, but he was once a 3rd grade 6 imperial bodyguards vice commander. I'm trained in that set of Ji clan's boxing style too. Shen Zichuan raised his head and looked at him. Ji Lei opened the door and waited for the errand runner to leave. Once there was no one around, he sat down beside Shen Zichuan's bed. Later, he committed a crime. His offense was one where he would have to be beheaded for it, but the earlier emperor was benevolent. In the end, he did not put him to death and simply exiled him beyond the past. Ji Lei propped up his knee and grinned at Shen Zichuan with his back to the light. Your Shifu has no capability to speak of. He's just a lucky loser. Guess how he survived? Through the glory of your Shenyang, just like you today. You probably don't even know who your Shenyang is. Let me tell you then, your Shenyang is Hua painting. 7 There are the 8 cities of Tsanan in Kudu. The Diqing Hua clan among them is the clan of the current Empress Dowager. So, it's all because of your Shenyang that the Empress Dowager spared your life today. Ji Lei lowered his head and whispered. But who would have known that your Shenyang had already died during the military upheaval? I'm telling you, Ji Gang is a worthless wretch. His father died 20 years ago, and 20 years later, his wife and son died too. Are you aware of who the main culprit is? You know it deep down. The perpetrator is Shen Wei. Shen Zichuan's breathing hitched. Shen Wei opened up the line of defense at Chasha River. The Biancha cavalry invaded and ran rampant all over. The machete severed your Shenyang's throat. Everything that happened before she breathed her last could make Ji Gang's life a living hell. Duanzhou fell into the enemy's hands. You said it was your brother who saved you. Ji Lei leaned back, sized up the back of his hand and said, Ji Mu, huh? Ji Gang raised you and watched you grow up, so Ji Mu was your brother. He was Ji Gang's only son, Ji Gang's only offspring, and the Ji clan's only descendant. But because of Shen Wei and you, he died too. Pierced through the heart with 10 of thousands of arrows. His remains were even left behind in the sinkhole, subjected to the humiliation of being trampled by the horses of the Biancha cavalry. I wonder how Ji Gang would have felt if he was still alive and had to collect his son's body. Shen Zichuan suddenly lifted his body. Ji Lei easily pushed him back down. Shen Wei betrayed his country and colluded with the enemies. This is a debt you have to shoulder. You seek to live today, and countless ghosts of Zhongbua who have died unjust deaths wails. You fell asleep at night, slowly distinguishing who among the others in your dreams are your Shenyang, your Shifu. You are still alive, but living is already more of an agony than dying. Can you forgive Shen Wei? If you forgive Shen Wei and help to exonerate him, then you will let your Shifu and his entire family down. No matter what, Ji Gang is the benefactor who has raised and nurtured you. How can you do unto him such a disloyal and unfilial act? Besides, even if you drag out your own feeble existence, there is no longer anyone else in this world who will empathize with you. Once you are in Kudu, you are Shen Wei. The people are enraged now. Those who hate you to the core are more than one could count. You still have to die anyway. Rather than dying a dubious death, why not speak frankly to His Majesty and come clean about Shen Wei's crimes? It would also comfort your Shifu's soul in heaven. Ji Lei suddenly stopped talking when he saw Shen Zichuan, who was pinned on the bed plank, smiling. The young man's deathly pale face took on a sinister, frosty turn. Shen Wei did not collude with the enemies. Shen Zichuan enunciated each word through clenched teeth. Shen Wei never colluded with the enemies. Ji Lei lifted Shen Zichuan and slammed him into the wall. A bang rang out, and bits of earth and dust rained down from the friction. The impact caused Shun Zichuan to cough incessantly. "There are too many ways I can use to kill you," Ji Lei said, "unappreciative little bastard. You got lucky this time and managed to escape death by the skin of your teeth. And now you really think you can survive beyond today?" Turning around, he dragged Shun Zichuan to the door of the cell and kicked it open before heading out. "I'm impartial in my duties and will obey the will of the Empress Dowager. But there are plenty of people in Dajo who can do as they please with no regard for authority. Since you are so hopelessly foolish, then I'll accede to your wishes. You want someone to kill you? That person is already here." The city gates of Kudu suddenly opened wide, and a row of pitch-black heavy-armored cavalry swiftly galloped in from beyond the gates, sounding like peals of thunder. Shun Zichuan was dragged along the path. The imperial bodyguards scattered, and the packed crowd split into two to clear the way for the heavy-armored cavalry. A Libe raptor hovered in the sky as the sounds of clanking armor drummed against his chest. The rumble of hooves drew nearer. Shun Zichuan opened his eyes and saw the leader of the heavy-armored cavalry charging straight over. The steed under the heavy armor was like a ferocious beast, huffing out hot clouds of air as it galloped a few steps before them. It was reined in just as it was about to crash into them. Hooves rose high in the air. By the time it came to a stop, the man on the back of the steed had already turned around and dismounted. Ji Lei stepped forward and said aloud, "Shao." The man did not even look at Ji Lei and headed right for Shun Zichuan. Shun Zichuan had only just moved his shackles when the man kicked Shun Zichuan right on the chest with lightning speed. The force of this kick was so powerful that Shun Zichuan did not even get the chance to steel himself for it. Blood splattered the moment he opened his mouth. His entire person went tumbling on the ground. For a moment there, he almost puked his guts out. Chapter 4. Last Descendant. Chapter 4. Last Descendant. Battle boots trampled over the accumulated snow and circled around Shun Zichuan before stopping at his side. The man used his toe to correct the position of Shun Zichuan's face, causing his boots to be smeared with bloodstains. The voice under his helmet was muffled as he asked, "Shin Wei's your old man?" Shun Zichuan could not stop the blood from gushing out through his clenched teeth. Even as he hastily used his hands, he could not cover it up either. He did not answer. The man looked down at him for a moment and said, "I'm asking you." With blood in his mouth, Shun Zichuan lowered his head and uttered a "yes." Ji Lei availed himself to the opportunity and said from the side, "He's the 8th son of Shin Wei. His name is Shun." The man lifted his arms and took off his helmet to reveal a young face. The gerfalcon circling in the sky rode on the cold wind and landed on his shoulder, sending up a puff of scattered snow. He looked at Shun Zichuan as if he were looking at a pair of worn-out shoes. It was hard to tell if his gaze was one of disdain or loathing. It was as frigid as a blade. Shun Zichuan did not know him, but he recognized the Libe armored cavalry. Back then, Shen Wei had cut a sorry figure as he retreated to the west. When he arrived at Cizhou, it was already Zhongguo's last line of defense. The Libe armored cavalry headed down from north to south. The hereditary prince, Xiao Jiming, braved the snow to spur his troops on for 3 days without rest, crossing the river of ice one straight to Cizhou. Who would have known that Shen Wei did not even manage to defend Cizhou, causing the Libe armored cavalry to end up besieged by the enemies? If it were not for Xiao Jiming having reinforcements in place, it would have turned out to be another brutal battle. After this battle, Libe came to hate the Zhongguo Shun clan the most. This man was not Xiao Jiming. But since he could spur a horse on to Kudu with a raptor on his shoulder, then he must have been the prince of Libe's youngest son and Xiao Jiming's younger brother, Xiao Qie. Ji Lei initially harbored the intention to instigate him, but he lost the courage to fan the flames when he saw the deputy general, Zhao Hui, behind Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie threw his helmet to Zhao Hui in passing. The sides of his lips curled into a smile, and the earlier penetrating stare dissolved away like melting ice. His frivolous temperament instantly materialized. Even the armor on him looked out of place now. Your Excellency Ji. He put his arm around Ji Lei's shoulders. I've kept you waiting. Ji Lei exchanged glances with Xiao Qie and laughed. He said, Second young master, it has been 2 years since we last met, and you have become so distant. Xiao Qie pointed to the blade at the side of his waist and said, I'm carrying a blade, so I'm considered half a soldier. It was only then Ji Lei seemed to notice it. He laughed and said, Excellent blade. Second young master came to His Majesty's rescue this time. It has been hard for you along the way. Let's have a drink tonight after you have sought an audience with the Emperor. Xiao Qie regretfully motioned Ji Lei to look at the Deputy General, Zhao Hui, behind him. He said, My eldest brother has sent someone to watch me. How can we drink to our heart's content like this? Once I've taken a breather in a few days, I'll treat you. Zhao Hui expressionlessly paid his obeisances to Ji Lei. Ji Lei smiled in response and said to Xiao Qie, Then, go on first to the palace. The guard of honor is still waiting for you. Both men chatted and laughed freely as they walked all the way to the palace. Zhao Hui followed behind them and cast a look at Shun Zichuan as he was leaving. The imperial bodyguards at the side caught the hint and dragged Shun Zichuan back. Ji Lei watched as Xiao Qie entered the palace. Once the men flanking him were his own men, he spat out a mouthful of saliva like a man down on his luck. The smile on his face disappeared, leaving only discontent behind. What he had been initially thinking was that since this hoodlum was usually impudent and audacious, it was only to be expected if he ended up killing a man. Who would expect this numbskull to be so crafty that he had actually handled this issue with such care? One kick and he had let Shun Zichuan off just like that. Xiao Qie entered the palace, and Zhao Hui handed him a handkerchief. He wiped his hands as he walked. Zhao Hui whispered, Young master's kick earlier was too risky. If the last survivor of that Shun dog died on the spot, the Empress Dowager would surely be displeased. Xiao Qie's smile vanished, and gloominess shadowed his face. He had just withdrawn from the desert battlefield, and the murderous intent and malevolent aura pouring off him were so compelling that the eunuch leading the way before them did not dare to eavesdrop again. Xiao Qie said coldly, My intent was to kick him to death. Old dog Shun allowed a bloodbath to happen in Zhongbua. We have been burying those soldiers in the Chashire sinkhole for half a month, and we are still not done burying them. And now the Hua clan wants to protect that old dog's remaining descendant for the sake of their personal relationship. How in the world could something go so perfectly according to wishes? Besides, my eldest brother has been carrying out raids for thousands of li too after this battle. There is nothing else to bestow or confer him with. Our Li Bei is at the peak of its glory. It has long become a thorn in the Empress Dowager's side. Zhao Hui said, The hereditary prince often says that the moon waxes only to wane. 3. The reward from Kudu this time is most likely a Hongmen banquet. For young master, the main forces are stationed hundreds of li away from the capital, and the aristocratic clan's eyes and ears are everywhere in the city. At this point in time, we must not act impulsively. Xiao Qie threw the handkerchief back to Zhao Hui and said, Got it. Is 5 ye here? Emperor Xianda fed the parrot. The feathered animal had been raised until it was impeccably wily. Imitating Emperor Xianda's words, it opened its beak and said, Yi is here. Yi is here. Yi pays his obeisances to your majesty. Your majesty. Your majesty. Long live. Long live. Long live your majesty. With the feed in his hands, Xiao Jiming answered, He should be here now. 2 years, huh? Emperor Xianda teased the parrot. I haven't seen him for 2 years. This lad takes after your father. He grows so fast. I'm afraid he will be even taller than you when he's all grown. Xiao Jiming said, He has grown taller, but he's still a child at heart. All he does is to stir up trouble at home. Emperor Xianda was about to say something when his coughs started up again. Pan Rugi held out a cup of tea to him from the side. Emperor Xianda moistened his throat for a moment. Before he could continue his words, he heard the announcement of Xiao Qia's arrival outside. "Come in." Emperor Xianda sat back on the chair and put up an arm. "Come in and let me take a look at you." The eunuch carefully lifted the curtain, and Xiao Qia strode across the door and entered. With an air of coldness around him, he kneeled at the bottom and kowtowed to Emperor Xianda to pay his obeisances. With a smile, Emperor Xianda said, "What a fine lad, looking all mighty in your armor. I heard that when the Biantia 12 tribes raided the food supplies route and relay station at the frontier the year before last, you showed your prowess and captured several people alive. Is that right?" Xiao Qia laughed and said, "Your Majesty thinks too highly of me. I've indeed caught a few men, but they are all small fry. The year before last, the Biantia 12 tribes carried out a raid on Guanbei's food supplies route. Leading the troops, Xiao Qia made his debut in battle. In the end, he was thrashed up pretty badly by those Biantia baldies. It was Xiao Jiming who cleaned up the mess for him. This incident turned into a joke after news of it spread that year. Consequently, Xiao Qia was reduced to an imbecile known to all. Seeing him thus, Emperor Xianda's voice softened. "You are young, and to be able to spur a horse on while brandishing a spear is already a skill in itself. However, your eldest brother is one of my dajo's 4 great generals. I'm sure he usually gives you some pointers on military tactics. Oh Jiming, I can see that Yi is aware of the need to keep forging ahead. You mustn't be too stern on him." Xiao Jiming voiced his compliance. Emperor Xianda added, "This time, Libei armored cavalry has performed meritorious service in coming to my rescue. Other than yesterday's major reward, I want to give Yi a small reward today as well." Xiao Jiming rose to his feet to bow and say, "It's his blessing to receive His Majesty's favor. However, he has no merit and no contribution to speak of. How could he receive such a lofty reward?" Emperor Xianda paused for a moment before saying, "You have launched a long-range raid over thousands of li and crossed the river of ice overnight. Your merits are immeasurable. I'll even bestow a reward upon your wife, Luigi, this time, let alone Yi. Libei is a frontier of strategic importance. You are still young, so it's inevitable for you to find it dreary and boring if you remain there for long. Now, I'm intending for you to come to Kudu to be a merry commander-in-chief of the imperial regalia. 6 Are you willing to?" Xiao Qia had been remaining motionless with his head lowered. On hearing this, he raised his head and said, "I'm naturally willing if it is a reward bestowed by your Majesty. All those in my family are warriors and generals. I can't even find a place to enjoy a song. If I remain in Kudu, I'd enjoy myself too much to even think of home or work." Emperor Xianda laughed aloud and said, "What a lad. I'm asking you to be a guard, but you just want to have fun. If your father were to hear of this, I'm afraid you will not be able to escape another beating." The atmosphere in the hall relaxed. Emperor Xianda retained both brothers to have a meal together with him. When it was time for them to withdraw, Emperor Xianda asked, "I heard that Qidong had sent someone over too. Who is it?" Xiao Jiming replied, "It's Lu Guangbai from the Bianjuan Commandery." Emperor Xianda seemed to be a little tired. Leaning against his chair, he waved his hand and said, "Tell him to come tomorrow." Xiao Qia followed Xiao Jiming out. The brothers had not walked far when they saw a man kneeling on the veranda. Pan Rugi approached and leaned forward to say with a beam on his face, "General Lu, General Lu." Lu Guangbai opened his eyes and said wearily, "Pan Gonggong." Pan Rugi said, "You can stop kneeling. His Majesty the Emperor is tired today. He can only see you tomorrow." The reticent Lu Guangbai nodded his head and rose to his feet to head out with the Shao clan brothers. It was only after they stepped out of the palace gates and mounted their horses that Xiao Jiming asked, "Why do you keep kneeling?" Lu Guangbai said, "His Majesty does not want to see me." Both men went silent for a moment, knowing full well the reason for this. But Lu Guangbai did not feel bitter about it. He looked sideways at Xiao Qia and asked, Did His Majesty reward you? Xiao Qia held the reins and answered, He's keeping me on a leash. Lu Guangbai reached out to pat the back of Xiao Qia's shoulders and said, How is this putting a leash on you? The ones he's keeping a leash on are your eldest brother and your father. Xiao Qia listened to the sound of the horse's hooves for a while before he said, His Majesty mentioned my eldest sister-in-law. I almost broke out in a cold sweat then. Lu Guangbai and Xiao Jiming burst out laughing together. Lu Guangbai asked, Are His Highness and Yiji well? Xiao Jiming nodded. With his cloak wrapped around his court attire, and with his armor removed, he was not as young and valiant like Xiao Qia. Yet, he had a presence that inexplicably commanded attention. He said, They are both well. My father is still concerned about the old general's leg injury. This time, he specially instructed me to bring the medicinal plaster 7 he usually uses. Yiji is fine too. It's just that she has been missing all of you very much ever since she's with child. She wrote many letters. I've brought them too. You can read them when you come over to the residence later. Lu Guangbai pulled the reins uneasily and said, Everyone in the family is a warrior. There's no mother or sister-in-law who could go over to accompany her. It's freezing cold during winter in Libei. I've been worrying ever since I heard of the news when I led the troops out of the Bianjuan commandery. Yeah. Xiao Qia turned his head as well and said, It's so dangerous in Suzhou. Brother is now a caged man and told me not to write home so as not to worry sister-in-law. The battle broke out too suddenly. It was only when he left home that brother and sister-in-law found out about the pregnancy. Xiao Jiming has always been able to show restraint. He merely said, Father is keeping watch at home this time to protect Yiji. Don't worry. I'll not go anywhere else once I return home after the new year. 8 Lu Guangbai sighed and said, In recent years, Libei has been caught in the heart of the storm. Every time we dispatch troops, we have to think twice. This time, we can only hate Xunwei for shrinking back without putting up a fight and leaving us with such a rotten mess. When my troops passed the Chaucer sinkhole, the blood was all over the horse's hooves. He could not escape the death penalty, so he immolated himself first. But there's indeed something odd about this matter. Jiming, you captured his son and had him sent to the capital. Did you notice anything? Xiao Jiming gathered his cloak in the wind and said, Shen Wei has been one to attach great importance to the distinction between those of lawful and common birth. This son of his is his 8th son of Shu birth. There's no one in his mother's family to back him, and so he was abandoned in Duanzhou to be raised there. It stands to reason that he has no access to inside information. There must be a reason His Majesty is so insistent. Xiao Qia put on his helmet and said, It's hard to quell the public wrath. His Majesty personally handed the military power for the garrisons of the 6 prefectures of Zhongbua over to Shen Wei. Now that such a thing has happened, he has to kill someone as proof of his impartiality. However, the one with imperial sovereignty over Dazhou was not the emperor, but the Empress Dowager, who held court in place of the emperor behind a screen. 9 Now that the situation was at a stalemate, everyone all had their eyes on this life of Shen Zichuan. If he pleaded guilty and died, then that would be all's well that ends well. If he did not die, then he would be doomed to be a thorn in the flesh. The Libei Shao clan was now at their peak of glory and splendor. Even Qidong, commander-in-chief of the Qi clan, had to give way to them. Xiao Jiming was the river of ice-armored cavalry among the 4 great generals, and he was also the brother-in-law 10 of Lu Guangbai of the Qidong Bianjuan commandery. To put it more explicitly, this was a man who could mobilize the Libei armored cavalry and rely on his wife's family to deploy the Bianjuan commandery garrison troop. Could have had no choice but to guard against him. Her Majesty is bent on preserving his life. Lu Guangbai pursed his thin lips. She's gunning to raise a jackal in the future who can rightfully and legitimately recover Zhongbua and, at the same time, submissive enough to be at her beck and call. When the time comes, she can consolidate power from within, while reigning in Libei from without. She will be a thorn in our side. Jimming, we must not let this lad live. The gale on the street outside brought snow that felt like slicing knives as it scraped across their cheek. The three men spoke no further. In this endless silence, Zhao Hui, who had been silent behind them, urged his horse on forward. Young master previously kicked him with 80% force right at his heart. His breathing was already weak, and his old wounds bled again when he fell to the ground. Zhao Hui pondered it over. Yet, he did not die immediately. Xiao Qia lifted the horsewhip and said, "He has been on trial for so many days and was even flogged. He was already hanging on by his last breath. That kick of mine was to send him on his way to the underworld. If he doesn't die after tonight, then I'll acknowledge that he's a tenacious one." However, Zhao Hui frowned and said, "He's skinny and frail, and he has yet to recover from his cold all this time. By all logic, he should have died a long time ago. Yet, he is still hanging on. There is undoubtedly something odd about it." The hereditary prince, Xiao Jiming, swept a glance at them out of the corners of his eyes, and both men shut their mouths. He gazed out at the road before them in the intense wind. After a moment's silence, he said, "Whether he lives or not is all fated." The wind howled, and the metal chimes under the eaves on both sides clanked against one another. The murderous aura among the snow dispersed. Sitting level atop the horse, Xiao Jiming calmly and unhurriedly hit the horse to spur it forward. Zhao Hui lowered his head and stooped over as he urged his horse on to catch up. The expression under Xiao Qia's helmet was vague. Lu Guangbai punched him on the shoulder and said, "He's your eldest brother, after all." Xiao Qia seemed to smile as he murmured, "Fate, huh?" Chapter 5. Frontline. Chapter 5. Frontline. The medicinal decoction leaked through the corners of Shun Zichuan's lips and soaked through the front of his clothes. The physician was so anxious that he sweated profusely and kept wiping his temples and forehead. He wouldn't swallow the medicine. The physician said, "He definitely can't make it through this." Gu Qingqing held his blade and stood to look at Shun Zichuan for a moment before he asked, "Is there nothing else you can do?" The physician's hands that were holding up the medicine bowl trembled, causing the spoon in it to clatter against the bowl. He kowtowed to Gu Qingqing with all his might and said, "It can't be done. He won't make it. Please prepare the straw mat one as soon as possible." Gu Qingqing looked to be in a predicament. He said, "Feed him first." Then turned around to step out of the door. Ji Lei was standing just outside. Gu Qingqing paid his obeisances and said, "Your Excellency, the physician said he won't make it." Ji Lei crushed the peanut shell and blew away the powder. He asked, "Has he breathed his last?" Gu Qingqing replied, "He's still hanging on to his last breath." With his hands at his back, Ji Lei turned his head back to look at Gu Qingqing. "Keep an eye on him. Before he dies, get him to sign the written confession." Gu Qingqing nodded and watched Ji Lei leave. He stood in the courtyard for a moment, then said to the subordinate beside him, "Go and call the errand runner over." A little while later, a hunched errand runner all wrapped in coarse linen came pushing a cart. The sky was dark by now, and the imperial prison was under tight security. Gu Qingqing raised a lantern to illuminate the way and motioned for the man to follow him in. The physician had already left. There was only an oil lamp lit in the room. Shun Zichuan lay on the bed with his face totally devoid of color. His hands and legs were as icy as those of a corpse. Gu Qingqing stepped aside and said to the errand runner, "Uncle Ji, here he is." The errand runner slowly stripped away the bundle of coarse cloth to reveal a face destroyed by fire. He stared at Shun Zichuan, took 2 steps over, and stretched out a trembling hand to caress Shun Zichuan's hair. When he saw how skinny and bloodied all over Shun Zichuan was, he could not stop his tears from coursing down his old cheeks. "Chuaner!" Tu Ji Gang's voice was hoarse as he called out, "Shifu is here." Gu Qingqing blew out the lantern and said, "Uncle Ji, don't be afraid. Ever since those from the prison knew that he was your disciple, They have been treating him with meticulous care. The previous interrogation looked like heavy torture, but it did not hurt his foundation. During the flogging, the brothers more or less went easy on him on your account. He won't be maimed even with 20 strikes. However, the eunuch from the palace overseeing the punishment has sharp, discerning eyes, so we didn't dare to be too slack. Fortunately, third Missy Hua came in time. Otherwise, Pan Gonggong would have gotten suspicious. Ji Gang's hair was already half white. With his world-weary face shedding tears, he said, "I, Ji Gang, will surely repay this kindness in the future." Gu Qingqing hurriedly said, "Uncle Ji, how can you think this way? What our brothers have repaid are the kindness and affection you have showered on us when you guided us and saved our lives in the past." With that, he sighed again. Who would have expected a Qing Yaojin III to come charging out of nowhere this suddenly? The second young master of the Shao clan was really trying to kill him with that kick. "Uncle Ji, can he still be saved?" Ji Gang felt Shen Zichuan's pulse and said with a forced smile, "Good lad. He did well with the technique Mu Four taught him. It's still not at the point of no return yet. Don't be afraid, my son. Shifu is here." Shen Zichuan had started following Ji Gang at the age of 7 and trained martial arts under him together with Ji Mu. Each strike from Ji clan's boxing style was tough and fierce at the outset. It had to be complemented by the Ji clan's mental cultivation technique. Those without a steadfast will could not practice it. Ji Gang was a heavy drinker when he was back at home. He taught the older one and forgot about the younger one. As the older brother, Ji Mu had to teach his younger brother a stance every time he learned one. No one would have expected Shen Zichuan to have mastered it pretty well over the years. Gu Qingqing bent over for a look and said, "But he's still young after all. I'm afraid his body will be in bad shape after going through this. Uncle Ji, I've sent someone to decoct the medicine the physician prescribed again. Please see if you can feed it to him." Shen Zichuan was burning up so much his mouth felt parched. His whole body was hurting all over. It was as if he was lying on the main street of Kudu, getting crushed by the horse carriages coming and going. The pain was like an endless inferno consuming Shen Zichuan's body. In the darkness, he dreamed of the heavy dancing snow, Ji Mu's blood, the cold of the sinkhole, and the kick he received before Shao Qie. Ji Lei was right. To remain alive now was to suffer. He received the flesh and blood Shen Wei gave him, and so he had to endure such punishments. He took over Shen Wei's sins and became the sinner the loyal souls of those who had died unjust deaths howled him out to be. By putting on these shackles, he would always have to shoulder this burden as he moved on. But he couldn't take it lying down. Someone suddenly pried his teeth apart, and a warm current flooded into his throat. The bitter taste of the medicine made Shen Zichuan's eyes watered. Hearing a familiar call, he forced his eyes open. Ji Gang fed him medicine and wiped away Shen Zichuan's tears with his rough fingers. He whispered, "Chuaner, it's Shifu." A sob formed in Shen Zichuan's throat, causing him to choke out the medicine along with his tears. He stretched out his fingers to hook the corner of Ji Gang's clothes and clenched his teeth, fearing this to be merely a dream he had made in the stupor of illness. Ji Gang's face was ugly. He turned his head slightly to avoid the light from the oil lamp and said, "Chuaner, stop harboring the will to die. You're the only one Shifu has left in this ignoble existence of his." Shen Zichuan could not stop his tears from streaming down his cheeks right there and then. He averted his gaze to stare at the pitch-black roof and whispered, "Shifu." His eyes gradually focused amidst the whir of the wind and took on a hint of malevolence. "I won't die," he said in a hoarse voice, "Shifu, I won't die." The next day, Emperor Xiande rewarded the 3 armies with a feast. Apart from Libei armored cavalry and Qidong garrison troops outside the city, the palace also hosted a banquet and led all the various ministers and officials to entertain the commander-in-chief of the army. Having changed into his court attire, Shao Qie overshadowed the delicateness of the scholars around him as he took his seat. The embroidered lion beast set against a pattern of clouds 5 on him radiated an air of intensity and awe. But his frivolousness reared its head when he sat down for a conversation. The civil officials engrossed in drinking kept stealing glances at him. As they said, a tiger father will not beget a dog for a son. 6. But how was it that it was only the hereditary Prince Xiao who took after his father? It was with tacit understanding they nitpicked at Xiao Qia's every move and action. They could feel that sense of willfulness and frivolousness hitting them right in the face. He was a world of difference from Xiao Jiming, who was sitting upright in the seat of honor. Don't detach yourself from this all. Lu Guangbai sat beside him to urge him. Since His Majesty has rewarded you, he will surely call you up later. Xiao Qie caressed the walnut in his palm, looking a little out of it. Lu Guangbai turned his head to the side to look at him and said, "You went out drinking with others last night, huh? Make merry while you can." Xiao Qie slacked in his seat. "If anyone dares to do a Xiang Zhuang's sword dance 7 later, I'll do a Fan Kuai 8 while in a state of inebriation. That would be the best of both worlds, wouldn't it?" "That's fine too." Lu Guangbai poured wine. "But drinking is bad for your health. If you want to be a good commander-in-chief, then change this bad habit of yours." "I was born at the wrong time." Xiao Qie threw Lu Guangbai a walnut. "I won't have the chance to play the hero now that the 4 general seats are full. If you can no longer make it someday, remember to let me know in advance. It won't be too late for me to kick the habit then." Lu Guangbai said, "Then I'm afraid you have to wait." Both men laughed for a moment and drank up half of the wine. They listened as the topic of discussion at the banquet changed to the Zhongbua Shen clan. Grasping the walnut in his hand, Lu Guangbai listened attentively for a moment and asked, "Didn't they say last night that this person won't make it?" Behind him, Zhao Hui responded in a hushed tone, "That's right. Didn't young master say that the kick was to send him on his way to the underworld?" Xiao Qie denied it. "Did I say that?" The other 2 looked at him in silence, prompting him to ask, "What?" Lu Guangbai said, "He didn't die." Zhao Hui said, "He didn't die." Xiao Qie exchanged glances with the other 2 for a moment and said, "It's none of my business, he's a tough one. The king of hell isn't my old man." Lu Guangbai looked up and said, "Let's see what His Majesty has in store for him. He's really one tough cookie." Kneeling behind then, Zhao Hui lowered his head to stuff himself with food. He said off-handedly, "Someone must be helping him in secret. Even if he doesn't die, he'll be maimed." Xiao Qie glanced coldly at the Hua clan seat a short distance away. The Empress Dowager is already advanced in age. All she can do now is to rack her brains trying to groom a stray dog. What a sin! Zhao Hui emotionlessly stuffed a spare rib into his mouth. Seeing that the atmosphere was satisfactory enough after 3 rounds of drinking, Emperor Xianda spoke, "Jiming." Xiao Jiming paid his obeisances and stood by to take his orders. Looking as if he could not hold his wine, Emperor Xianda leaned against the dragon throne 9 and said, "When all is said and done, there is no conclusive evidence for Xin Wei's troops' defeat and whether he had colluded with the enemy." That Xin Pan Rugi bent over and whispered, "Your Majesty, it's Xin Zichuan." Emperor Xianda paused for a moment, but instead of continuing, he turned to the Empress Dowager and asked, "What does Imperial Mother Ten think?" A solemn silence descended upon the banquet as the entire court of civil and military officials lowered their heads to listen. The Empress Dowager wore a Zoluo 11 headband with a depiction of a dragon dropping a pearl among golden clouds. A row of golden emerald leaf beads circled around the headdress with a dazzling array of big pearls hanging from it. She sat, poised and dignified, high up on her seat. Her neatly combed glossy hair was the color of frost. No one in the entire banquet hall dared to raise their head to look directly at her. The Empress Dowager said, "Our morale suffered a blow in the Battle of Zhongbua, all because Xin Wei panicked and lost his presence of mind. But now that he had immolated himself due to fear of punishment, and his descendants have all died in battle, there's only this son of common birth left behind. It goes against benevolence and righteousness to eliminate his whole clan. There is no reason we can't let him live so that he will feel gratitude towards us." The banquet hall was silent. Lu Guangbai suddenly spoke up. "This subject 12 doesn't think it's appropriate." He took 3 steps out of the file of officials to kneel in the hall and continued, "Her Majesty is benevolent. But the Battle of Zhongdu is different from past battles. Although there is no evidence that Shen Wei colluded with the enemy, he is, nevertheless, still suspected of it. This lad is his remaining descendant. If we let him live, I fear he will become a danger in our own backyard in the future." The Empress Dowager looked at Lu Guangbai for a moment and said, "The Earl 13 of Bianxia has been stationed in the desert to defend it for decades, and he doesn't exactly emerge victorious every battle." Lu Guangbai replied, "Although my father is not invincible, no external enemies have ever been able to push deep into the territories of the Bianjuan commandery for decades." The big pearls beside the Empress Dowager's ears swayed gently. She said, "It's precisely because of this that it's even more pertinent to teach him protocol and virtue so that he can understand the disastrous consequences of this war. It's easy to kill a man. The horses of the Bianxia cavalry stepped into Zhongbua and killed tens of thousands of Dazhou commoners. We have yet to seek redress for the humiliation of our empire. What crime is there for a child to be guilty of? This subject finds it inappropriate as well." The Deputy Senior Grand Secretary of the Grand Secretariat, 14 Hai Liangyi, who had remained quiet all this while, supported himself up from the table and kneeled down as well. "Her Majesty is benevolent, but this is no trivial matter. Even if Shen Wei did not collude with the enemy, he still deserves to be beheaded after this battle. Moreover, this child has been tried and interrogated thrice, and his confession statement is all over the place. He insisted that Shen Wei did not collude with the enemy. But he's a son of common birth Shen Wei had raised elsewhere. If he had no idea that Shen Wei had colluded with the enemies, then how would he know for sure that he didn't? It can be seen that he is cunning by nature. He lacks credibility. Just as General Liu has said, if we keep the last descendant of the Shen clan alive, he will one day become the scourge of trouble in our own backyard." Instead of being furious, the Empress Dowager said, "Secretariat Elder 15 Hai, please rise quickly." After Pan Rugi helped Hai Liangyi up, the Empress Dowager said, "It's as my dear ministers said. I've 16 been biased in my thinking. I'll leave the decision-making on this matter to the Emperor." Under the watchful eyes of his ministers, Emperor Xianda coughed feebly. He accepted the handkerchief Pan Rugi handed him and covered his mouth. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "What Imperial Mother has said is not without reason. The child is innocent. However, when all is said and done, Shen Wei's troops were still defeated, and he had indeed abandoned the city. On account that there is only this bloodline left in all 9 generations of his clan, I'll give this child a chance to reflect on his sin and redeem himself. Jile, this subject is at your command. Take this child into custody at Zhao Zui Temple. 17 without my order, he cannot venture out." Xiao Qia threw the broken pieces of walnut onto the plate. Zhao Hui asked, "Young master, aren't you eating?" Xiao Qia said, "Maimed and useless. Who wants?" Zhao Hui's eyeballs followed the plate as it turned. He said in a lowered voice, "Isn't this to the satisfaction of all? We didn't get what we wanted, neither did the others. Caging him in is still better than letting him out." Lu Guangbai returned to his seat and said, "Not necessarily." Xiao Qia pointed to himself. "Am I not a caged man too?" Lu Guangbai and Zhao Hui said in unison. "Good for you." Chapter 6. Imprisonment. Chapter 6. Imprisonment. It was a rare sunny day in Kudu the day Shen Zichuan entered Zhao Zui Temple. White snow covered the palace tiles, with green plums mirrored on vermilion walls. Sunlight shone through the eaves, casting slanting lines of yin and yang one before his feet. He had just recovered from a bout of severe illness, and was skinny to the point of being skeletal. At 15 years of age, his past and old dreams were like ashes scattered clean by this biting cold north wind the moment he opened his eyes. Gu Qingqing went down the stairs first. He turned his head to look back at him and said, "It's getting late." Shen Zichuan supported himself against the pillar and slowly made his way down the stairs. He was neither accustomed nor terrified to be exposed under the sun. The childishness of youth seemed to have been pulverized amidst that pallor of his face. Other than the fragility of illness, they could discern nothing else from his expression. Ji Lei was waiting at the entrance of Zhao Zui Temple with Xiaofuzi following beside him. Raising his head to look at this ancient temple, Xiaofuzi marveled, "What a magnificent and queer temple. It really doesn't seem to be the place to imprison people." "You don't know its past," Ji Lei said. Zhao Zui Temple was originally a place for the imperial clan to offer incense. Lord Guangqing's handwritten orders were even previously offered in worship inside. In its heyday, all the eminent monks in the world assembled here, and large-scale intellectual discourse was all the rage for a time. "Why haven't I heard any mention of it in recent years?" Xiaofuzi sized up the temple gate. "It's rather dilapidated. There haven't been any repairs done on it for a long time, have it?" Ji Lei spent a moment composing himself and said, "It's been 20 years. The condemned crown prince instigated the 8 great training divisions of Kudu to plot a rebellion. After his troops' defeat, he retreated here and fought back like a cornered beast. In the end, blood splattered all over the Buddha statue as he slit his own throat to end his life. From then on, the former emperor no longer set foot in his place. He stripped the temple of its name and renamed it Zhao Zui." "Oh man, 20 years!" Xiaofuzi clutched his throat as if this was a surprising thing to him. "I wasn't even born yet. That was the time His Excellency Ji just joined the imperial bodyguards, wasn't it?" Ji Lei did not answer him. He turned to the rear and rebuked, "Why is he not here yet?" Xiaofuzi was still circling around the Zhao Zui stone tablet. When he was done, he asked Ji Lei, "But I've never heard of anyone being locked up inside either?" Ji Lei seemed annoyed and said, "Those imprisoned are all the Secretariat ministers involved in the case of the condemned crown prince. The clans of the civil officials and military commanders involved were all executed. Those that remained are few and far between. It has been 20 years, who would still remember?" The prisoner wagon too rolled up to them. Gu Qingqing paid his obeisances to Ji Lei and said, "Your Excellency, I've brought him here. Send him in." Ji Lei then said to Shen Zichuan, "After today's farewell, we probably won't have the chance to meet again. The Emperor's magnanimity knows no bound. You must remember this with gratitude for the rest of your life." Shen Zichuan turned a deaf ear as he entered the Zhao Zui Temple. That vermilion door with paint peeling off it moved with a loud rumble. He stood in the middle and looked at Ji Lei. Ji Lei was displeased by his gaze, and was about to lose his temper when he saw Shen Zichuan unveiled a smile on his cleansed face. "He's gone mad," Ji Lei thought subconsciously. But then he heard Shen Zichuan say, "Your Excellency Ji." His voice was calm. "We will meet again." The vermilion door shut with a bang and stirred up a cloud of dust. Xiaofuzi covered his nose and coughed while stepping back repeatedly. But then, he saw Ji Lei standing motionlessly where he was. Ji Lei only returned to his senses after being called a few times. He swiftly mounted the horse. With the sun shining on his back, he cussed. "But just my rotten luck." Xiao Qia was riding his horse across the street when he bumped into Ji Lei. Reining it in, he laughed and said, "Old Ji, aren't you on duty before the Emperor?" Ji Lei looked covetously at the battle steed under Xiao Qia's crotch and said, "I have to take that surviving criminal into custody at the temple today. I'm now hurrying over to the palace." "Second young master, that's an excellent steed. I heard you tamed it yourself?" "I had free time." Xiao Qia lashed out the horsewhip with a crack, and the gerfalcon in the sky swiftly swooped down onto his shoulder. He said, "Torturing falcons 3 and playing with horses are all the talents I have. Once you assume your duties after the new year, for you'll be busy." Jile said, "Kudu's latest eminence. I'm not on duty tomorrow. How about a drink together?" Xiaoqia said, "If the wine isn't good, I'm not going." Jile laughed out loud and said, "Of course it's good wine. Who dares to invite the second young master if the wine isn't good? I'll call at your residence later to invite you. Would the hereditary prince have the time to have fun together with us?" Xiaoqia caressed his bone thumb ring 5 and said, "My eldest brother, huh? He's not a fan of such activities. Why? It's not prestigious enough for you if I'm the only one going?" Jile hurriedly said, "That's not what I said. Second young master, that settles it then." Xiaoqia acknowledged him and kicked the horse to leave. But just before leaving, he seemed to recall something and asked, "How did that surviving criminal look? Can he walk?" "Walk he can," Jile responded. "But not nimbly enough from the way I see it. How many can actually survive floggings without post-injuries? He is lucky to be able to walk." Xiaoqia did not say a word more as he spurred his horse on and left. A little later, the errand runner delivered the meals to Zhao Zhe Temple. Shun Zichuan lit the oil lamp but did not touch the food. Grabbing the oil lamp, he walked around along the small corridor beside the main hall. The dust had been accumulating here for a long time. Some side rooms in the wings had fallen into a state of dilapidation with the doors and windows already rotten. Shun Zichuan saw several skeletons that toppled over when the wind blew. Since he did not come across any living creature, he returned to the main hall. The Buddha statue had collapsed, and the incense altar was old but still durable. The size below was just right. Shun Zichuan hung up a tattered curtain cloth and lay down underneath with his clothes on. The cold from the floor made his legs hurt. He endured the pain and closed his eyes to count the hours. Fresh snow started to fall in the latter half of the night. Shun Zichuan listened as the night owl hooted twice. He sat up and lifted open the cloth just in time to see Ji Gang step through the door before him. "After you've eaten," Ji Gang opened the cloth bundle. 6 train. "This place can't keep the wind out at night. It's too cold. Shifu is afraid you will fall ill if you sleep." Shun Zichuan looked at the roasted chicken wrapped in oil paper and said, "One should abstain from meat when ill. Shifu, you can have it." Ji Gang tore up the roasted chicken for him and said, "Bullshit. This is the time where you should eat your fill. Shifu likes to eat the rear end of the chicken. Even at home, it's my favorite. Save it for me." Shun Zichuan said, "Since I'm following you, I will eat what you eat." Ji Gang glanced at him and laughed. He said, "Brat." Master and disciple split the roasted chicken among them. Ji Gang seemed to have grown a mouthful of iron teeth as he chewed even the chicken bones into pieces. He handed the bottle gourd to Shun Zichuan and said, "Drink some wine if you really can't put up with the cold. But don't drink too much. Just sip accordingly, just like your brother." They never mentioned Zhongbua, Duanzhou, or even the Chashire sinkhole these days. Shenyang and Ji Mu were unspoken wounds both master and disciple shared. Both of them thought they had hidden it pretty well, but they never realized that the blood was already seeping out and that the pain was mutual. Shun Zichuan took a sip and handed it over to Ji Gang. Ji Gang did not take it. He said, "I've quit. Shifu doesn't drink anymore." Silence descended in the hall. Without the shelter of the door, the snow fell before their very eyes, becoming the only scenery in this endless night. Ji Gang asked, "Why are you in a daze?" Shun Zichuan said, "Shifu. Just say it if you have something to say." "I'm sorry." After a long silence, Ji Gang said, "It's not your fault." Shun Zichuan clenched his fist. He stared at the snow as if the tears would fall if he blinked. His voice hitched as he said, "Did you go looking for us at Chashire?" Ji Gang slowly leaned against the incense altar, burying his body within the shadows. It was as if he was looking for his own voice. After a long time, he said, I went. I found him. He found him. Ji Gang found his son, all covered in arrows, in the pit of snow. He had jumped into it and stepped across those thick piles of corpses to dig out Ji Mu's body. Ji Mu was only 23 of age. He had just been promoted to squad commander of the Duanzhou garrison army. His armor was new. The day he put it on, Hua Pingting hung a protective talisman for her son in the lock. When Ji Gang found him, he had been frozen purple along with his other comrade. Shen Zichuan raised his head slightly and said, Shifu, I'm sorry. Ji Gang was already old. He tousled his white hair and said, He's the elder brother, isn't he? That's what he should do. Everything that happened is not your fault. The snow fell for a moment. Ji Gang huddled over and said, Who would have known that those Biancha Baldis would come? That he would become a soldier and charge to the very front of the battle is something that can't be helped. I taught him martial arts, and with that temperament of his, you might as well kill him than to ask him to flee. He could hardly bear to see others suffer and dragged down. So how would he flee? It's not your fault or his. Shifu is the one to be blamed. I indulged in excessive drinking. Your Shenyang scolded me for so long, but I never quit. When the cavalry came, I couldn't even fight properly. At this age, I'm old and disabled. I've long gone useless. Water dripped onto the bottle gourd. Shen Zichuan gripped it and said nothing. Old and disabled. A grinning head suddenly poked out from behind the Buddha statue and said, Old and disabled. Ji Gang sprang up like a leopard and bellowed, Who's there? The unkempt man gradually stretched his body out and imitated Ji Gang. Who? When Ji Gang heard this voice clearly, he pressed Shen Zichuan down and involuntarily blurted out in astonishment, Grand Mentor 7 Qi. The man speedily shrank his head back. Kicking the Buddha statue, he yelled, I'm not the Grand Mentor. Ji Gang ran a few steps behind the Buddha statue in pursuit. When he saw the man about to bore his way through a hole to flee, he could not help but pounce and grab him by the ankle. The man immediately let out a squeal like a pig being slaughtered and shouted, Your Highness! Your Highness, flee quickly! Shen Zichuan covered his mouth and joined forces with Ji Gang to carry him back. Who is this? Shen Zichuan asked. You are young, so you've never heard of him. Ji Gang's voice was unsteady as he pressed the man down and said, Grand Mentor Qi, this is great. You are still alive. What about His Excellency Zhou? Is His Excellency Zhou here too? Grand Mentor Qi was thin and small. He could not kick them away, so he glared at them and whispered, He's dead. I'm dead. His Highness is dead. Everyone is dead. Ji Gang said in a heavy voice, Grand Mentor, I am Ji Gang. The Imperial Bodyguard's Vice Commander, Ji Gang. Still badly shaken, Grand Mentor Qi hesitantly raised his neck to look at Ji Gang's face. He said, You're not Ji Gang. You're an evil spirit. Ji Gang said sorrowfully, Grand Mentor, in the 23rd year of Yongyi, 8 I escorted you into the capital. This was where His Royal Highness the Crown Prince met and welcomed you. Have you forgotten this too? Grand Mentor Qi's eyes glistened as he raved madly. They killed the Crown Prince. Your Highness. He sobbed and said, Ji Gang, Your Excellency Ji. Take His Highness away. The Eastern Palace has become the target of public censure. What crime has His Highness committed? Ji Gang dejectedly released his hands and said, Grand Mentor, in the 29th year, Ji Lei sold himself to the enemy. I've already been kicked out of Kudu. In these 20 years, I've been reduced to a mere fugitive of the martial fraternity. I have also gone on to take a wife and fathered a child in Duanzhou of Zhongbua. Grand Mentor Qi stared at him blankly and said, His Highness is gone, but the imperial grandson is still around. Take him away. You take him away. Ji Gang could not help but close his eyes and said, In the 30th year of Yongyi, the Crown Prince slit his own throat and committed suicide in this place. No one from the Eastern Palace returned alive. Grand Mentor Chi leaned back and muttered. That's right, he sobbed like a child. How did it come to this? This night had made Ji Gang mentally and physically exhausted. He said, after the parting of drifting clouds, 10 years have gone like flowing water. 9 Who would expect that when we meet again in this life, it would be under such circumstances? Grand Mentor Chi turned his body to hide his face and said, Did they lock you up too? Let them lock. Let them kill all the literati in this world. Ji Gang said, My disciple is shouldering the blame for his father. Grand Mentor Chi said, Shouldering the blame for his father. That's great. Who's his father? He couldn't have angered His Majesty too, could he? Ji Gang sighed and said, Last year, Shen Wei's troops were defeated. He did not expect Grand Mentor Chi to turn his head suddenly upon hearing the words, Shen Wei, and crawled on all fours towards Shen Zichuan. He asked, This is Shen Wei's son? Ji Gang had a sense of foreboding, and was about to act when Grand Mentor Chi beat him to it and pounced. Making a grab for Shen Zichuan with his wizened fingers, he said savagely, Shen Wei? Shen Wei killed His Highness. Sharp-eyed and agile, Shen Zichuan had already grasped Grand Mentor Chi by his wrists. Right after this, Ji Gang grabbed hold of Grand Mentor Chi and said, Grand Mentor, do you want my disciple to die today for the same reason the imperial grandson did? No matter what crimes Shen Wei committed, it has nothing to do with my disciple. Grand Mentor Chi gasped heavily and spoke in a trembling voice. Since he's Shen Wei's son, he was Shen Wei's son when he was born. Ji Gang held Grand Mentor Chi down and suddenly kowtowed. He continued, but he later became Ji Gang's son. If I utter a single word of falsehood tonight, then I'll die a terrible death. Grand Mentor, are you going to kill my son? Chapter 7. Grand Mentor. Chapter 7. Grand Mentor dumbstruck, Grand Mentor Chi pulled his hands back. He turned his head away, refusing to look at Shen Zichuan. He had been imprisoned here, deranged for 20 years, hating everyone beyond this place. Yet, tonight, he had to persuade himself not to hate the son of his enemy. Then, Grand Mentor Chi's voice sounded plaintive. Then, who can I kill now? The snow fell silently, and the crow in the courtyard flew away from the branch. The tattered curtain in the temple fluttered along with the wind. Grand Mentor Chi trembled and rose to his feet, then staggered with his arms raised high, devastated and inconsolable. The die is cast. The victor emerges king, and the loser is the rebel. His Highness's virtuous name has been smeared, and you and I are those treacherous traitors doomed to be condemned by posterity. Who do I kill? I'll kill this muddle-headed and blind heaven. 20 years ago, His Highness's blood was spilled here. What have we done wrong, that the Emperor would be so ruthless to wipe us out? Tears poured down Grand Mentor Chi's face. His body trembled as he kneeled at the entrance of the hall and banged his head repeatedly on the floor. Kill me now as well. The snowy night was miserably cold. No one in the empty temple responded. It was in this way Grand Mentor Chi kneeled, just like that deteriorating and battered Buddha statue. Fragments of cotton-like snow covered him as he remained still and silent under this brilliantly illuminated Kudu night. An hour later, Ji Gang helped Grand Mentor Chi up, and the 3 men sat in a circle before the incense altar. Many things happened tonight because of me. I will take this opportunity and explain to my heart's content. Ji Gang lifted his sleeves and said, Grand Mentor, Chuaner was born in the Shen clan. He's Shen Wei's 8th son of common birth. 8 years ago, the situation between the lawful and common factions in the Prince of Jianxing's residence were as irreconcilable as fire and water. Shen Zhouji, the hereditary prince of Jianxing, won the favor of his father and reassigned his brothers of common birth out of the residence. At 7 years of age, Chuaner was sent back to Duanzhou, but his enlistment as a soldier to bolster the army numbers failed to work out. So he lived in the side courtyard to be raised by his mother's maid. But that woman was greedy and extravagant and often misappropriated the child's food rations. Pingding was on friendly terms with his mother. When she learned of this, she asked me to take Chuan back so that we could raise and nurture him. Grand Mentor Chi sneered and said, Shen Wei himself was of common birth and had his share of injustices in his childhood. How ludicrous of him to favor those of lawful birth when he came to have sons later. What's more, he's such a lecher and went on to beget so many sons. What a sin! We have repeatedly sent letters to the prince residence, but not once has Shen Wei ever replied. Grand Mentor, look at the 8 great clans of Kudu. We have never heard of such blatant abandonment even among the son of common births of those clans. Ji Gang furrowed his eyebrows. And so it was like this that Chuan came to follow us. That time, Mu'er was 15 of age. He was so delighted to see his younger brother. Since then, our family of 4 has settled down in Duanzhou. We even had to expend a lot of effort just to be able to get into the military services yellow register. One after a moment's silence, Grand Mentor Chi said, You left the capital bearing the name of a criminal. It's naturally difficult for you to register your household. It was precisely to suppress rebels and prevent civil unrest that His Royal Highness strictly enforced the yellow register system to record households back then. Ji Gang said, I understand. Grand Mentor, what happened in Kudu after I left? How did His Royal Highness the Crown Prince end up in that state? Grand Mentor Chi pulled over the tattered curtain and wrapped it around his shoulders. He said gloomily, After you left, Ji Wufan lost the confidence of the Emperor. Pan Rugi, having received the Emperor's favors for serving the Empress, took up the post of brush-holding director at the Directorate of Ceremonial. As a result, the imperial bodyguards fell into decline, and its 12 offices existed in name only. After Ji Wufan's death, Ji Lei took up the mantle alone. From then on, the Eastern Depot too became the godfather of the imperial bodyguards and ceased to associate with the Eastern Palace. Later on, the emperor suddenly fell ill and was frequently bedridden, so the trivial affairs of the court were handed over to the Grand Secretariat and the Eastern Palace to manage. But the Hua clan relied on the emperor's favor of the empress to install many incompetent people in the court, and this led to the resurgence of 6 ministries' practice of bribery. The troubles that were the Empress Dowager's kin 3 were now out in force. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince went many times to submit a memorial to His Majesty. But he never expected Pan Rugi to rely on his authority of office in endorsing memorials for to take over control of government affairs with the Empress. There was no way His Royal Highness's memorial would ever make its way before the Emperor. Not only that, after the Emperor fell ill, the Empress stopped the Grand Secretariat and the Eastern Palace from paying their respects to him. Those castrated bunches are a menace to the Empire. Ji Gang repeatedly sighed. If I had known Pan Rugi harbored such ambitions, I would never have stopped father from killing him. Even if you kill a Pan Rugi, there will still be a Pan Rushi and a Pan Rui. Grand Mentor said in a daze. The harem interferes in state affairs, while their kin runs rampant. Ji Gang, you don't understand. These are all the deeply rooted maladies of the 8 great clans. As long as all the 8 great clans are not eradicated, history will just repeat. How is the Empress able to control the affairs of the imperial court when she has lived for so long in the inner palace? It's all due to the long-amassed power and influence of the Hua clan. Even if the Empress wasn't a Hua back then, even if the Empress was someone from one of the other 8 great clans, this would still happen. But Shun Zichuan could not help asking, isn't His Royal Highness the Crown Prince of lawful birth by the Empress herself? No. Grand Mentor Chi lowered his head. His Royal Highness's biological mother was an imperial concubine. The Empress was childless, having never given birth before. But His Royal Highness was taken to the inner palace and personally raised by the Empress herself. As the saying goes, even a tiger will not eat its own cubs. Kinship doesn't exist in the imperial clan. The hall fell silent again. Ji Gang let out a breath of cold air, and said in a hoarse voice, "My father lost the favor of the emperor because my excessive drinking bungled up matters. If it weren't for this, His Royal Highness would never have come here. I initially thought that Ji Lei would not have become a turncoat if there's Ji Wufan before you." Grand Mentor clutched the tattered curtain. Recalling it still left a bitter taste in his mouth. Who would have known that he— Grand Mentor, you are unaware of it. Ji Gang looked at Shinzichuan. Chuaner didn't know it either. My father, Ji Wufan, was sworn friends with the former emperor. He was also the commander-in-chief of the imperial bodyguards. But father's first wife died early and he had no intention to remarry, so he adopted 3 sons. Besides me and Ji Lei, there was also eldest brother. Eldest brother could not bear the malicious acts in the imperial prison, and so he left the capital in his adolescence and went to Tianfei Watchtower to be a soldier there. Ji Lei and I served in the imperial bodyguards and remained by father's side to look after him as a show of filial piety. This set of Ji Clan's boxing style and Ji Clan's blade style were all taught by father. Later, due to several incidents, father felt that Ji Lei was harboring evil intentions and suspected him of currying favor, so he only imparted the Ji Clan's mental cultivation techniques to me. But this entirely created a divide between us brothers. After father's death, Ji Lei did an overhaul of those under his command. Many of the old guards were let go. From then on, the imperial bodyguards were no longer what they once were. Grand Mentor Qi murmured, "Such is fate." The Eastern Palace's subordinates joined forces and worked as one but still failed to protect His Royal Highness. The Emperor suspected His Royal Highness of staging a rebellion, but the authority for the 8 great training divisions of Kudu all lay in the hands of the 8 great clans. The imperial bodyguards found the treason documents and asserted that it was His Royal Highness behind it. Our people were sent to the imperial prison, and many of them died. Those who could not withstand the punishments finally gave in. The sick emperor flew into a rage and believed Pan Rugi's slanders. From then on, His Royal Highness was trapped in a dead end. Tears drenched his face as he seemed to go insane again. His Royal Highness was here, trapped in a dead end. Why didn't they kill me? How do they expect me to hang on to my last breath till now? Living a life like this is worse than death. Yet I still can't hurry on my way to the underworld. He suddenly stared at Shinzichuan, and his tone turned frenzied. I can't take this lying down. Years of strategic and tactical planning have all gone down the drain. Countless Eastern Palace's aides have been killed and wounded, and the injustice His Royal Highness suffered has yet to be redressed. I can't take this lying down. He grabbed Shinzichuan's arm again. You are so young. You still have a chance. Grand Mentor, Ji Gang rose intending to stop him. You can protect him for a moment, but can you protect him for life? Grand Mentor Qi gripped Shinzichuan tightly. I can stop hating or blaming him today on account of your fatherly affection, but can you make everyone in this world think this way? As long as his surname is Shun, there will be plenty of people wanting to kill him. Can he really sleep with a peace of mind just because he is skilled in martial arts? Ji Gang, your father was a martial arts master, but didn't he still end up dying of illness all alone? In this kudu, where the tides of power ebb and flow, it's killing someone with invisible means that's the most fatal. How could you have the heart to let him face the predators stark naked? Ji Gang clenched his fists and said nothing. Tugging Shinzichuan, Grand Mentor Qi went down on both knees. He looked at Shinzichuan and said in a trembling voice that was choking with sobs, I'm Qi Huilian from Yuzhou. You don't know me, so I'm telling you. I'm the triple Yuan 5 top scholar in the 15th year of Yongyi. 6 from the founding of Dazhou to this date. There are only 5 people who have come out first in all 3 levels of the civil examination. I'm a subordinate of the Eastern Palace, and also the Minister of Personnel of the Ministry of Personnel cum Deputy Grand Secretary of the Grand Secretariat. I taught the Crown Prince. And I'll now teach you. I'll teach you everything I have learned in my life, all right? Shun Zichuan stared into Grand Mentor Chi's eyes. He was unusually calm. After that brief silence, he fell to the ground on his knees with a thud and kowtowed thrice to Grand Mentor Chi. If teacher imparts the classics to me, I'll kill your enemy for you. Gu Qingqing went out at the hour of Mao 7 and headed for Zhao Zui Temple. The air was clear and cold along the way, and it even snowed. He huffed into his hands and looked for a steamed bun stall as he walked. He heard the sounds of someone calling him from afar. There was a red silk umbrella unfurled among the snow, and the person under the umbrella swayed slightly as he moved towards him. Those who could hold up red silk umbrellas in Kudu were all bigwigs of 5th grade 8 and above. Gu Qingqing stood by the side of the road and supported his blade as he paid his obeisances. The thick smell of wine assailed his nose as the person staggered his way before him. The Red Cavalry. 9. This person stopped and reached out a hand to pull Gu Qingqing's waist token. 10. He looked at it for a moment and said, "Where is Company Commander Gu going now? It's freezing cold." Gu Qingqing stared at the man's black boots and answered, "To reply, Your Excellency, this humble subordinate is on office duty today and ought to be heading for the palace." Xiao Qia had been drinking all night, and his clothes were in disarray. He dangled the waist token and said, "This doesn't seem to be the way to the palace." Gu Qingqing raised his head to reveal a shy smile and said, "The second young master is noble and does not know how much of a clutter these civilian alleys are. From here, you can make your way through a few civilian alleys, and you'll be able to turn into Shunwu Street, which will lead you straight to the palace gate." On hearing this, Xiao Qia smiled and threw back the waist token to him. He asked, "You know who I am?" Gu Qingqing caught hold of the waist token and buttered him up. "The armored cavalry of Li Bei are brave and skillful in warfare. The hereditary prince and second young master have rendered meritorious service in coming to the emperor's aid. Who in Kudu does not know of you? Second young master, are you heading back to your residence? The road is slippery. May this subordinate be so bold as to ask if you need me to send you back?" Xiao Qia looked at him and said, "Do I look like a drunkard? You may leave." Gu Qingqing bowed again and left. When Zhao Hui arrived, he saw Xiao Qia rapping hard with the red silk umbrella and yelling at the steamed bun stall to hurry. He approached and said, "The residence has prepared breakfast. Why is young master standing here to have your meal?" Xiao Qia said, "I'm too hungry to walk back." Zhao Hui shook the cloak open and said, "Wine and lust will only lead you astray. Young master, let's go home." Xiao Qia draped himself with the cloak, but did not move his feet. He ate 2 steamed buns, taking no notice of the gazes of those around him. He asked Zhao Hui, "Can one reach Shunwu Street from here?" "Yes, but it's not an easy path to walk." Zhao Hui replied, "Civilian alleys with state-owned ditches. The narrower the alley, the more polluted the ditch water. Kudu has never repaired the public ditches in recent years, and this piece of land is rotten beyond recognition. Once the weather warms up, the snow melts, and the rain falls, the sewage will flood the streets. Think about it, is such a path a smooth one to take?" Xiao Qia said, "I only asked you one question. Why give such a long reply?" Zhao Hui said, "What I'm saying is that you must be sure to take the correct path. Young master, there's no hurry to drink. If you take a detour instead, you will make your way there even faster." Xiao Qia wiped his hands and motioned Zhao Hui to fish out his money. "That's really strange. Go make some inquiries if there are any official records of someone called Gu Qingqing on duty in the 12's offices of the Imperial Bodyguards today. Old man, find another line of work as soon as you can. This steamed bun tastes really bad." Chapter 8. Suspicion. Chapter 8. Suspicion. The Imperial Army was waiting to rotate shift. It was so freezing cold that they were all huddled into themselves. The Imperial Army of Kudu was originally the Imperial Guards, one of the 8 cities. They were the impregnable fortress of the Imperial Palace in Kudu. Going by the rules, Trivialities such as taking a person into custody would not have been tasked to them. But then the 8 great training divisions of Kudu rose to power, and the duties and responsibilities of both parties were switched around. The imperial army was reduced to being the burden of Kudu. It not only abolished the military drills, but even literally became the errand runner of Kudu. Today they were all hereditary military households who had never seen real weaponry and were just idling around waiting to die. Guqingqing was the company commander of the imperial bodyguards. He was not really considered an official in Kudu, but he was just perfect for the imperial army in charge of detention. This was because they had to mutually look out for each other as they patrolled Kudu every day. If it had been an official of a slightly higher rank, they would not have dared to bribe as they wished. Besides, Guqingqing was extremely generous in his treatment of them. So the imperial army turned a blind eye and let Ji Gang take on the chores of the original errand runner. Guqingqing greeted the imperial army and distributed the hot steamed buns he had brought with him. Ji Gang had yet to come out. The squad commander saw him looking pensive, so he said, "If Brother Qing is in a hurry, please go ahead and check it out on our behalf." Guqingqing said, "Wouldn't that be against the rules?" Biting the steamed bun, the squad commander waved his hand to motion to the imperial army guarding the back door to make way. He said, "Brother Qing isn't an outsider. Besides, we have surrounded this Zhao Zui temple until not even a drop of water can trickle through. The man within can't escape for sure." Thus, Guqingqing did not decline his offer further. He turned around to enter Zhao Zui temple. Ji Gang was sitting under the eaves. When he saw Guqingqing coming, he stood up and asked, "Is it time already?" "It doesn't matter since it's still dark. Uncle Ji can stay a little longer." Guqingqing surveyed the temple courtyard as he spoke. "This place is not fit for human living. And it happens to be in the dead of winter right now. I'll send some quilts over later." Noting that he seemed to have something on his mind, Ji Gang asked, "What's the matter?" Guqingqing hesitated and said, "It's not a big deal. It's just that I met second young master Shao on the way earlier." Shun Zichuan raised his head and said, "That Shao Chia." Guqingqing said, "He's the youngest son of the Prince of Libei. He's also that same man from the other time. His gait is unsteady and he reeks of wine. He must have gone drinking last night. As long as it isn't Shao Jiming." Ji Gang turned his head back to say to Grand Mentor Qi, "Grand Mentor has not left this place for 20 years. You probably don't know the current 4 great generals of Dezhou. The Prince of Libei has begotten himself a good son. That Shao Jiming is truly remarkable." But Shun Zichuan asked Guqingqing, "Brother Qing, did he ask you something?" Guqingqing thought carefully and said, "He asked me where I was going, and I said I was taking a shortcut to get to the command office. Then he said that this road did not seem to lead to Shenwu Street. So I gave him a perfunctory response. I suppose the descendant of a princely noble like him will not personally probe into it. But this matter involves the Shao clan. It pays to be careful. Later on, you should still head for the palace and put a mark on the duty roster." Ji Gang rubbed his hands in the snow. "Chuaner, let's train." "Hold it." Shinzichuan's eyes were dark and deep. "Since it is a miscellaneous alley in a civilian district, then what is a noble descendant like him doing on this street so early in the morning?" Guqingqing was stupefied. He said, "That's right. The entertainment spots are all in Donglong Street, which is some distance away from the residential area. He's nursing a hangover, and it's such a cold day. Why did he come here?" "He's keeping watch at a tree to await a rabbit." Grand Mentor Qi wrapped himself in the tattered curtain and turned around, pointing his posterior out. He said, "The matter of Shen Wei concerns the Shao clan. I heard that kick of his was clearly aiming for this lad's life. But the lad's still alive and well now. How could he not get suspicious? He shouldn't have said another word if he didn't mean it." Shen Zichuan was still full of trepidation as he recalled that kick. Oh no! Gu Qingqing turned pale and said, "It's my fault for being negligent. What should we do? I'm afraid he's already on the way." Shen Zichuan turned towards Grand Mentor Qi. "It doesn't matter. Since teacher has already guessed it, he must have a countermeasure." Zhao Hui arrived at the Imperial Bodyguard's command office. Although the assistant commander walking with him was of the same rank as him, he did not dare to put on airs. He led Zhao Hui to the records room and said, "What does General Zhao want to check?" "These are all 12's office's duty rosters for today." Zhao Hui solemnly picked up a book to flip through for a look and said, "It has been hard on our Imperial Bodyguard's brothers patrolling the restricted grounds. A few days ago, I received the assistance of a company commander named Gu Qingqing. I've come today bearing a gift to give my thanks. Is he on duty today?" The company commanders from the 12's office are a motley crew. They are all inside. As the assistant commander spoke, he shifted over to the wall where the duty registers of the 12 offices were hanging on the upper side, all clearly categorized. But Zhao Hui could not touch them. This was taboo in the palace. The assistant commander asked, "Does the general know which office does he belong to?" Zhao Hui said, "I heard that only those from the Imperial Carriage Office, Parasol Office, and the Domesticated Elephants Office could be on duty on the morning shift." The assistant commander carefully checked through the registers by name. After a while, he turned and said to Zhao Hui, "General, there's no such person on duty today. Let me try looking elsewhere for you?" Zhao Hui gently closed the book in his hands and said, "There's no need. I'll find him on my own." When Zhao Hui left the records room, the sky had just brightened. He went back along the road and strode out of the palace. The accumulated snow had been freshly swept off Shenwu Street, but the road was slippery. The sedan bearers who came and went as they transported the bigwigs did not dare to be rash. They walked on the road cautiously and made every effort to stay steady on their feet. As Zhao Hui passed by a sedan, he caught a glimpse of the sedan bearers bearing broadswords. Who would have known that this one look would make him furrow his eyebrows? "Hold it!" Zhao Hui stopped the sedan chair and asked, "Is this the chair used by the commander-in-chief?" Sure enough, the sedan bearers were the Imperial Bodyguard. The one in the lead nodded and said, "You know who we are transporting, and you still have the audacity to block our way? Move out of the way quickly!" Zhao Hui raised his hand to reveal his own Li Bei waist token. The Imperial Bodyguard nodded and said, "General, please excuse me for the offense." The sedan curtain moved as a slender hand lifted it. A delicate face glanced lazily at Zhao Hui and pouted coquettishly to the person within. "Your Excellency, he's looking for you." Ji Lei had just returned with a hangover. Sitting unreservedly in the sedan, he said to Zhao Hui, "General Zhao, what's the matter?" Zhao Hui merely stared at the Imperial Bodyguard in the lead and said, "It's nothing. I heard young master went drinking with your Excellency last night. Are you only just returning?" Ji Lei smiled and said, "So you're worried about the second young master?" "The young master returned home the moment I opened my eyes this morning. Is the hereditary prince looking for him?" "I just can't help worrying." Zhao Hui bowed. "I'm sorry to have alarmed your Excellency." "It's fine. I just came from there myself." Ji Lei gestured with his hand. "Who was it that butt heads with the general earlier? Hurry and apologize to the general." The Imperial Bodyguard in the lead kneeled on one knee and said to Zhao Hui, "This humble servant, Gu Qingqing, was blind not to recognize the general, thus offending you. I'm willing to accept my punishment." Zhao Hui had not misread. Gu Qingqing's name was indeed written on the waist token hanging at the side of his blade. Even after listening to Zhao Hui complete his report, Xiao Qie was still looking at the storytelling script 4 with one of his legs propped up. Zhao Hui said, "From how it looks, he didn't lie." He was assigned to pick up Ji Lei before he could enter the palace. "Yeah," Xiao Qie said absent-mindedly. Qinjun Pavilion is just nearly. Of course he can make it in time. But something feels off to me. Zhao Hui's thumb caressed the hilt of his blade. Xiao Qia turned the page and asked, "You can't figure it out?" "I can't." "Then I'll tell you." He suddenly sat up, crossed his legs, and propped up a hand on one knee. "You entered the capital with my eldest brother. His Majesty the Emperor personally met and welcomed him. The 12 officers of the imperial bodyguards followed closely behind in a ceremonial procession. How could he not recognize you now?" "That's hard to say," Zhao Hui said. "Perhaps he didn't remember me. You haven't even changed your robe, and you carry a blade on you. Even if he doesn't recognize you, all he has to do is to use his brain a little, and he wouldn't dare to reproach you in such a condescending manner right there on the street." Xiao Qia said, "Besides, he doesn't seem like he has a bad memory to me. He could even recognize me clearly. I only find it too much of a coincidence." Zhao Hui pondered over it. "I just happened to run into him." A coincidence is exactly what they want. Xiao Qia cast aside the storytelling script. "This Shen Zichuan," Zhao Hui said. "Letting him enter Zhao Ze temple now looks like a losing move," Xiao Qia said with a thoughtful gaze. Gu Qingqing removed the fur collar and wiped his sweat. Wu Kaikwan, who was outside, came running in pressing his legs together. He repeatedly said, thank you, Brother Qing, thank goodness for you." Gu Qingqing said, "It's nothing. We are all comrades." Wu Kaikwan grinned and turned his head to yell at the person in the records room, "Old Su? Put Brother Qing on the record for today. He stood in for me to carry the sedan. I caught a cold last night and felt dizzy this morning. Fortunately, Brother Qing was there to help." Gu Qingqing lowered his head to wipe his sweat. He said, "You caught a cold. Let's go to the Su household's shop for mutton soup together later." Wu Kaikwan hastened to say, "Sure, it's Brother Qing's treat. Old Su, did you hear that? Let's go together later. Don't sweat it." Gu Qingqing patted Wu Kaikwan on the back. "Rest well. If you don't feel well the next time, don't hold it in like you did this time. Just tell me." Wu Kaikwan nodded his head like a puppy. He was craving mutton soup so much that he could hardly care about anything else. Grand Mentor Qi was finally bundled up in a quilt at night. He sat opposite Shun Zichuan and said, "In another half a month, it'll be the Jingdan festival. 5 Kudu will host the banquet of 10,000 officials. When the time comes, all the provincial administration commissioners and prefectural surveillance commissioners of the various lands will enter the capital to offer their greetings. I'm still not clear about the current state of affairs, so tell me now." Shen Zichuan was in the snow dressed only in flimsy clothes as he struck up the starting stance of the Ji clan fist. Despite it, sweat was dripping off his forehead. He said, "The Prince of Libei has been in poor health for many years, and all military affairs have been handed over to the hereditary prince, Xiao Jiming, to handle on his behalf. In all likelihood, he won't attend this time. The Qidong 5 commanderies have rendered meritorious service in coming to the Emperor's rescue. The first one who came to receive his bestowed title was one of the 4 generals, Lu Guangbai. Commander-in-Chief Qi should be arriving these few days. With this, 2 major military powers of Dazhou will be temporarily residing. Hold it." Grand Mentor Qi fished out a ruler 6 from his quilt and asked, "Which 4 generals are the 4 generals?" River of Ice Armored Cavalry, Xiao Jiming. Fire Beacon amidst blowing sand, Lu Guangbai. Wind guiding the scorching plains, Qi Juin. Thunder sinking the Jade Stage, Swaqianqiu 7. I have only heard about Swaqianqiu. But I know that Lu Guangbai is most likely the son of the Earl of Bianxia, Lu Pingyan. Although Lu Pingyan later came to guard the deserts of the Bianjuan Commandery, he was from Libei in his early years. He's sworn brothers with the Prince of Libei, Xiao Fangxiu. If this Lu Guangbai has a sister, she would definitely be the Xiao clan's daughter-in-law. Am I right? Yes, Shen Zichuan said as he dripped with sweat. Lu Guangbai's younger sister is the consort of Li Bei's hereditary prince. So, where did the two major military powers come from? Grand Mentor Qi said, with this connection, the Lu clan is the mole Li Bei planted in the Qidong 5 commanderies to lurk within. Furthermore, there's still the 8 great training divisions in Kudu, and the imperial army under the 8 great training divisions. The 8 great training divisions don't have as many people as those from Li Bei and Qidong, and its reputation is not as valiant as theirs either. But you must remember that Kudu is the heart of Dazhou. What they are holding in their hands is the emperor's life. Grand Mentor Qi weighed the ruler in his hand, then grabbed the gourd and warmed himself with a few sips of wine. You also must remember this. Although the imperial bodyguards cannot be called soldiers, their advantage is far greater than that of soldiers. When the emperor commands the troops, he must be assisted by influential officials and valiant generals. A general should exercise good discretion on the battlefield and not be bound by orders of his sovereign. 8 keep a tight rein, and it'd be hard for them to make something of themselves. Maintain a loose grip, and you'll soon suspect them of becoming too much of a tiger. 9 This yardstick is difficult to grasp. You need to act in accordance with the situation and understand how to adapt to changes. However, the imperial bodyguards is a different matter altogether. They are the vicious hounds under the emperor's command, and that chain is held by the emperor alone. Whether to tighten or loosen his grip, or to pamper or discard them, wholly depends on the emperor's moods. Such a blade, such a dog, if it were you, would you like them, or would you not? Shen Zichuan pushed himself to hang on for a moment, then said, like them, and they will go wayward. Favor and trust them too much, and they will become the source of calamity. Your brother sure has taught you plenty. Grand Mentor Qi said, that's right. Remember it. Commit it to memory. Favor and trust them too much, and they will become the source of calamity. Keeping the virtuous close and the flatterers far is a good virtue to cultivate. But when you are personally involved, black and white will intersect. How will you be forever able to distinguish who are the virtuous talents and who are the crafty sycophants? Besides, there are many matters that even a virtuous gentleman cannot do, while the crafty and the despicable ones can. The emperor resides long-term in the imperial palace. He must understand the principle of checks and balances as well as listen to the voices of the various officials and ministers. As you can see, with the imperial bodyguards comes the Eastern Depot, and with Li Bei comes along Qidong. After a pause, Grand Mentor Qi continued. Water brims only to overflow, the moon waxes only to wane. 10 Do you know why the Shao clan hates Xin Wei so much this time? Not only is there nothing else to bestow or confer them with after this battle, but even if the Shao clan fights another battle, their defeat is a defeat, while their victory is also fundamentally a defeat. They have already reached their end. Shen Zichuan asked, their victory is also a defeat? Their victory is also a defeat. Didn't Shao Jiming instantly offer up his younger brother after winning the battle? For every battle he wins in the future, he will be in even more of a peril. This time he paid for it with his younger brother. Next time, it might be his wife, his father, or even his own self. Chapter 9. Promotion. Chapter 9. Promotion. Since the end of the year, many of the pedestrians on the streets of Kudu wore Neoi, 1 made of black gold paper. 2 As Jingdan Festival 3 approached, the common folks strove to prepare pastries and cooked meat at home. The palace had started procuring the ingredients for the banquet of 10,000 officials half a month in advance. Everyone from the court of imperial entertainments was busy running all over, yet the eunuchs still got to line their pockets. Shao Chia rustled his way through the book and said, when those officials on the outside enter the capital, it is inevitable for them to have to pay respect to the officials in the capital. But Pan Rugi is so impressive that he drew up such a well-organized list. Only when they shell out the money according to his list will they be left in peace. And these are only just the small changes at the beginning of the year. Lu Guangbai brushed aside the foam in his tea. Let me give you an account. The money the little eunuch under Pan Rugi receives in a year far exceeds the 2-year salary of a battalion commander guard at the frontier. Dazhou uses the military troops every year, and each time the Ministry of Revenue asks us to deploy the troops, they have to plead with us and coax us to do so. But after the battle is over, we become the bastards who demand our payment. It's the ones with the money who are the masters. Xiao Qia smiled and said, when we came to the Emperor's rescue before the new year, our Libei troops braved the snow to march forward. The men and horses are tired, and the repairs for the armored cavalry's equipment need to be completed before the start of spring. We have owed the workshop money for too many days. Everything requires money. Zhao Hui carefully made the calculations in his mind and said, before we entered Kudu, the Libei troops engaged in farming duties 5 converted the annual grain harvest into money. Every day we have to count every cent and make every cent count. Our hereditary prince's consort does not even dare to purchase expensive attire for the residents during the New Year and other festivals. The money a palace eunuch like Pan Rugi has collected has already exceeded Duanzhou's total tax amount. The investigating censors throw their weight around when they are delegated to local government. But so what? In Kudu, they don't even dare to let out a fart. What to do? We are poor. Lu Guangbai lamented. Every year, we have to worry about money. Jiming made a trip to the capital this time, so the Ministry of Revenue did not dare to delay it on his account and had long submitted the request to the Grand Secretariat. Pan Rugi has also behaved himself and endorsed his approval. The funds should be handed over before he leaves the capital. We have eldest brother. Xiao Qia set aside the book and looked towards Lu Guangbai. But what are you going to do? His Majesty wouldn't see me. Lu Guangbai said, the Lu clan is unpopular in Kudu. The 8 great clans have always regarded us as savages from the desert, and the Hua clan wouldn't even look us right in the eyes. But even if you tell me to show my respects to Pan Rugi, I don't have the money to. We are so poor at home we could barely put food on the table. Other places could cultivate lands for their troops to farm, and that is at least an emergency measure to meet need. But our Bianjuan commandery has just yellow sand for miles around. Even if we want to farm, we don't have the fields. This time, we dispatched the troops out on a swift expedition, and all the food for the men and horses during the journey were paid for with Commander-in-Chief Chi's personal savings. To put it bluntly, it was all thanks to Commander-in-Chief Chi's understanding and sympathy. Otherwise, my troops would have never made it past Tianfei Watchtower. But how much money would Commander-in-Chief Chi have? She's using the remnants of her own dowry that the old imperial consort has left for her. Her own private troops are almost on the verge of selling their own pants. The Ministry of Revenue keeps playing Taiji 7 with me every day. Dereliction of duty, huh? They keep pushing my account aside and refuse to allocate the funds to me, figuring that a country bumpkin like me could do nothing about them. Lu Guangbai lost his temper in a rare display of anger. He could not help it. The Bianjuan commandery was defending along the borders of the desert, and they were the garrison troops that had the most dealings with the Biancha cavalry other than Libei. They worked themselves to death all year round, running all over the place just to eke out a living under the blades of the machetes. They barely had sufficient sleep, and would never get to eat their fill. Kudu was oppressing him, and the Earl of Biancha had long become a well-known pauper among the princes. His clan had never even kept any of the rewards bestowed to them. All of it had been converted into money and used to supplement military supplies. Once Xiao Jiming was neatly dressed, the maidservants left in a single file, leaving only the 4 of them in the room. Xiao Jiming held up the teacup and took a sip of his tea. He said unhurriedly, "The timing is good this year. Jingdan banquet of 10,000 officials. Qi Juin should be here already, right?" Lu Guangbai said, "That's right. I was originally worried, but on second thought, let them do as they please and drag this matter on. If they delay it until the commander-in-chief enters the capital, well then, good luck to them. Xiao Jiming said, she is now the most popular in Kudu. Even those local ruffians and hooligans that are the loan sharks in Kudu have to give her face. The previous debt can be repaid, but you can't always rely on her alone. The Bianjuan commandery is important. From what I've heard of the situation yesterday, the Ministry of Revenue will be asking you to recruit soldiers again this year. Lu Guangbai caressed the rim of the teacup and said, recruit? Don't even think about it. They are all afraid of death now that something happened to the 6 prefectures of Zhongbua. They are concerned about the Bianjuan commandery getting stabbed by the Bianxia 12 tribes, and they even feel that my 20,000 troops and horses aren't enough. The thing is that we can recruit the soldiers, but do we have the money to pay them? I can't afford to feed and train them. I will not do it even if they hold up a blade to my neck this year. Xiao Qia suddenly sat upright and said, that's right. In the past, the Ministry of Revenue was the quickest when it comes to assigning military funds and rations to the 6 prefectures of Zhongbua. The men died this time, so we can leave aside the issue of the money. But where are the grains? The Bianxia cavalry can't carry away that much grain with them when they flee. The remaining 3 men looked at him. Lu Guangbai said, silly lad, you can stop wondering about that. The grain was recovered and used to make up for the salary arrears owed to the 13 cities of Jueshi last year. Can't you guess the reason the Ministry of Revenue dodged the issue? In recent years, the 8 great clans have become the 8 great training divisions, and their equipment and budgets are the best in Dajo. All this money is taken right from the tax fund. Think about it, the sum of 2 million. Any human would know how insane this account is. But both the Empress Dowager and Secretariat Elder Hua did not pursue this matter. So who in the Ministry of Revenue who would dare to bring it up? The state treasury is emptied of this portion of the money. Last year, the 13 cities of Jueshi were hit by a plague of locusts, and there was truly not a single grain harvested that year. So, where would they get the money for disaster relief? It was all thanks to the Provincial Administration Commissioner, Jiang Qinshan, who issued a peremptory order for all the officials of various ranks within the prefecture to release their private stock of grains to help the disaster victims. Because of this, Jiang Qinshan saved hundreds of thousands of commoners, but he ended up being hated by the various officials in Jueshi. Before the new year, I heard that the debt collectors were even blocking the entrance to his house. He is a high-ranking provincial official of the 2nd grade, and yet his 80-years-old mother still has to weave to pay off their debt. It would be forcing them to their death if Kudu still did not release the money. In the end, Secretariat Elder Hai submitted a memorial and contended with the Grand Secretariat and Pan Rugi for half a month before they barely made up for the shortfall. Zhao Hui could not help but say, those people say they are poor, but the amounts of bribe money are all large sums. On the other hand, those doing the real work are all walking on eggshells while tightening their belt. We might as well not come to Kudu this time. It really makes one disheartened. It was snowing outside the house, but there was no festive atmosphere within. The mess kept piling up one after another, and all the new sights in Kudu were like mist skimming the surface. Its wound had yet to heal, and yet they still had to cover it up even as pus dirted its entire grounds. The snow came at just the right time to conceal it all so beautifully that they could pretend not to notice. Everyone could all live like a drunk in this fool's paradise together. In the middle of the night, Pan Rugi sat on the couch with his eyes closed. The naturally colored paper flower was placed by his hand so that he could wipe his hands after meditation. Xiaofuzi did not even dare to breathe heavily as he held a brush case in his hands and waited carefully on the footrest. After an hour, Pan Rugi exhaled and opened his eyes. Xiaofuzi immediately presented the brush to him. With a frown of concentration, Pan Rugi wrote a few words in his palm. Xiaofuzi buttered up to him and said, "Our forefather is becoming more and more sagely after having recently received His Majesty's teachings. Earlier, this grandson even saw a faint wisp of purple cloud 8 rising. Pang Rugi wiped his hands and asked, "Do you know why you have never been able to join the Directorate of Ceremonial?" Xiaofuzi replied, "Forefather dotes on me." "It's one thing to dote on you." Pan Rugi threw the paper flower into Xiaofuzi's bosom. "Not being able to read the situation is another. His Majesty has been enlightened for 2 years, and he still doesn't give off purple aura. I'm merely a slave. How can I ascend first? Isn't that overstepping my boundaries?" Xiaofuzi handed the hot tea over to Pan Rugi. He smiled ingratiatingly and said, "Forefather is my master, and so Forefather is my heaven. Seeing Forefather meditating is just like seeing the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord 9 descending to the mortal world. How on earth would I give it that much thought?" Pan Rugi rinsed his mouth. "This filial piety of yours could be called a skill in itself." Xiaofuzi let out a hee-hee as he moved close to Pan Rugi's leg and said, "I have to show my filial respect to Forefather since it's the Zhengdan festival. While I was procuring for the festival before the new year, I saw a stunning beauty in Prince Chu's manor. I made some inquiries around. His Majesty can't use her anyway, so it's of utmost importance for me to give her to you as a show of my filial piety instead." Pan Rugi said, "How stunning is she? Can she compare to Third Missy? Furthermore, isn't that Prince Chu's woman? Given that overbearing and domineering temper of his, I'm afraid he won't let her go that easily." Xiaofuzi said, "No matter how noble Prince Chu is, he can't be even nobler than His Majesty, can he? His Majesty didn't even say anything, so isn't it only right for me to present her to Forefather? Besides, you don't have to worry about this matter. I assure you that all the proper arrangements will be made before the beginning of spring. It'll be her good fortune when the time comes for you to lay your eyes on her regardless of whether or not you accept her." Pan Rugi set aside the teacup and said, "There's no hurry. I'm not an avaricious or a lecherous man. Since you brought up Prince Chu, then how is the one who has the same temper as him, Mr. Muddling Along Second Young Master Shao, doing lately?" Xiaofuzi pounded Pan Rugi's thigh in a massage and said, Forefather, this second young Master Shao is really a legend. From the first night since he came to the capital, he has been out drinking with the others. He has never done any serious work except to drink and make merry. Prince Chu and that clique of his all like to have fun with him. Birds of a feather truly flock together. That's fine, but he is still a member of the Shao clan after all. His Majesty placed him in the Imperial Regalia service, which is too close for comfort. It makes me uneasy." Pan Rugi thought about it for a moment, then suddenly smiled and said, "I have thought of just the perfect place to send him away to. Put on my shoes. I'm going to Mingli Hall to serve His Majesty." It was the Zhengdan Festival's banquet of 10,000 officials the next day. There was nothing much going on during the feast, and just as the banquet was about to break up, they all heard Emperor Xianda say, "Yi, has it been comfortable for you in Kudu these days?" Shao Chia stopped peeling the tangerine and answered, "To reply, Your Majesty, it's comfortable." Emperor Xianda turned towards Shao Jiming and said, "I've been thinking about it. Putting Yi in the Imperial Regalia service is a waste of talent. He's a good child who has been on the battlefield. Keeping him before me is too much of an aggrievement for him. How about this? Let Yi go to the Imperial Army. The Imperial Army Viceroy Ten used to be Shi Guan, but he now has the 8 great training divisions to manage. He is really up to his ears in work. Let Yi take his place." Right at once, Lu Guangbai frowned. At the very least, the Imperial Regalia service would be on duty before the Emperor. If anything were to happen, His Majesty could not turn a blind eye to it. But what good was the Imperial Army? The Imperial Army was now the errand runners of Kudu. Was this a reward? How could this even be considered a reward? Lu Guangbai was about to rise to his feet when he saw that Shao Chia had already bowed his thanks. A viceroy sounds imposing, just like a commander-in-chief. Xiao Qia smiled frivolously and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Secretariat Elder Hua laughed out loud and said, "His Majesty is wise. Hereditary Prince, here's a young hero in the making." The sounds of congratulations rose and fell like the tide during the banquet. Xiao Jiming smiled and said nothing as he looked at Xiao Qia. Lu Guangbai drank the wine and lowered his head to say to Zhao Hui at the side, "Such an arrangement is clearly a death sentence aimed at Jiming's heart." After the banquet broke up, Xiao Qia disappeared without a trace. His rowdy bunch of friends wanted to congratulate him on his promotion, so he took them drinking. When they re-emerged at midnight after drinking, they were all staggering on their feet. Prince Chu Li Jianheng was a few years older than Xiao Qia. He was a true scoundrel. Before getting into the sedan chair, he even tugged at Xiao Qia's sleeve and said in a drunken stupor, "How capable of you! The Imperial Army, huh? You need not bother about patrols or defenses. It's a very idle job, and yet you still get to collect a salary. You get the money, and you don't have to put your life on the line. All the best things in the world have fallen into your lap. You must be secretly smug." Xiao Qia smiled too. It was even a wicked smile. He said, "That's right. That's why I lose no time in inviting you for a drink. Together in the future, we'll run amok in Kudu." "Right, right." Li Jianheng patted Xiao Qia vigorously on his shoulder. "That's the spirit. Come to my residence a few days later. I'll get them to celebrate for you again." Xiao Qia watched the sedan move away into the distance and flipped atop his horse. He had personally trained and tamed his horse, the offspring of wild horses, at the foot of the Hongyan mountain ranges. It was a swift and brave divine steed that was black all over except for a patch of white on its chest. Xiao Qia clapped his horse forward. The stores on both sides of the street were about to light the lanterns to send him off. He raised his hand and said, "Put them out. Don't illuminate them." The store's attendants looked at each other, but they did not dare to disobey him. The lanterns went out one by one until there was only the dim glow of the frosty moon and icy snow on the road. Xiao Qia whistled, and the gerfalcon swooped down from the darkness of the night amid the whistling of the wind. He then hit the horse to spur it on. The steed under his saddle snorted out a puff of hot air and broke into a sudden dash. The strong wind launched a frenzied assault against Xiao Qia, dissipating the hot flushes he had from drinking. In the darkness, he looked like a cornered beast on a rampage. The sounds of hooves became the massive crashes of collisions. He galloped through the deserted street. The darkness ripped his smiling face away until all that remained was a cold and lonely silence. The steed had been running for an unknown period of time when Xiao Qia suddenly tumbled off it. He crashed heavily into the pile of snow and remained there with his head lowered for a moment. The horse raised its hooves and trotted around him before it lowered its head to nudge him. The gerfalcon remained perched on the back of the horse and tilted its head to look askance at him. Xiao Qia endured it for a moment, then propped himself up with his arms and vomited. After a long time, he stood up and leaned against the wall. The bone thumb ring on his thumb was a little large and had fallen off somewhere. He searched for it in the snow, but then he heard someone whispering a question a short distance away. "Who's there?" Xiao Qia ignored him. The Imperial Army squad commander felt for his lantern to shine at him and said, "How dare you? Your Excellency?" Xiao Qia turned his head and asked, "Know me?" The Imperial Army squad commander shook his head honestly. "I don't know which of the lords you are. I'm your big brother." Xiao Qia cast away the dirted cloak and lowered his eyes to continue looking for the thumb ring. He cussed in irritation under his breath and said, "Give me the lantern. You can scram." The Imperial Army squad commander cautiously came nearer and said, "You are second young master, right? We have just received the order. It's still dark, and it's too early for an investigation. There's still time if you come again tomorrow." Xiao Qia held out his hand, and the Imperial Army squad commander handed the lantern over to him. Xiao Qie asked, "What is this place?" The Imperial Army squad commander respectfully replied, "The perimeter of Kudu, Zhao Zui Temple." Xiao Qie said, "You may leave." The squad commander retreated, and was about to leave when he heard Xiao Qie speak. "Xin Zichuan is here? Beyond this wall?" "That's right." The squad commander was getting more and more apprehensive. "He's detained in, get him to come out." The stunned squad commander hastened to say, "How would that do? Even if you are the viceroy, you can't do that." His Majesty the Emperor strictly commanded. Xiao Qie lifted the lantern and said, "I have the final say in the Imperial Army." The squad commander said tentatively, "Don't kill. I'm fucking telling him to come out and sing me a tune." Xiao Qie flung the lantern aside suddenly. The light swiftly went out. He stood in the darkness, his eyes malicious. Chapter 10, Drunken. Chapter 10. Drunken Xiao Jiming gathered his cloak around him as he stood under the lantern. Zhao Hui stood guard behind him and said, counting the hours, he should be back now. The man who went to pick him up said that the young master had left by himself on his horse. Why isn't he here yet? Xiao Jiming let out a breath of cold air and looked at the sky in silence for a moment. He said, whenever he's unhappy in the past, he would go galloping on horseback at the foot of Hongyan Mountains. This habit won't change. Zhao Hui said, at the very least, the Imperial Army is a post. Xiao Jiming shifted his gaze and asked, do you know what father regrets the most in his life? Zhao Hui shook his head honestly. Xiao Jiming said, it's that he has fathered a Yi too late. 3 years ago, we were ambushed at the foot of Hongyan Mountains. Before father's reinforcements arrived, Yi led the 20 members of the cavalry that had been originally assigned to guard him and rode his horse across the Hongjiang River at night. He groped around in the quagmire for half the night and burned Bianche's grains. When I saw him, he was smelly and dirty all over as he soaked in the water until the wounds on his legs festered. That year, he was only 14 of age. I asked if he was afraid, and he said that he had a blast of a time. Father often said that the Lu clan are the eagles of the desert, while the Xiao clan are the dogs of Libei. I don't like this choice of phrasing, but we are like chained dogs every time we deploy troops from that time onward. It's no longer as satisfying as it was 10 over years ago. Battling all these years has long drained the valor in me. The members of the Xiao clan are not dogs, but the only one left today with the nature of the wolf is Yi. What he yearns for in his dreams are the mountains of Libei. And yet, he now has to remain in Kudu and forget about the freedom of riding horses. Father and I have both let him down. After a moment's silence, Zhao Hui looked at Xiao Jiming and said, there's no need for the hereditary prince to put yourself down. The young master is impetuous by nature and is not the best choice of person to lead and continue the legacy. It doesn't matter if he's born earlier or later, the reins of Libei must not be handed over to him. The commander-in-chief must have the tenacity of one shaped by experience, and a willpower as unwavering as a rock. The young master is not up to it. Xiao Jiming did not say a word more. The strong wind that night sent the lanterns swinging ceaselessly. Master and slave waited for a little less than an hour before they saw someone urging the horse on towards them from a distance away. Hereditary prince. The man on the horse tumbled off and said, something happened to the young master. Zhao Hui immediately held up his blade and said, where is the young master? An hour earlier. The squad commander shoved a shackled Shen Zichuan down the stairs. Sing. The squad commander egged him on from behind. Quick, sing a few lines. Shen Zichuan did not utter a word as he looked at the man squatting under the shadows of the wall. His chest hurt the moment he saw the gerfalcon. He could not help but purse his lips into a tight line as he stood where he was. Xiao Qie said, come over and stand here. Shen Zichuan exhaled a breath of hot air and slowly shuffled forward to stand a short distance away from Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie rose to his feet and asked, "Who is your mother?" Shen Zichuan replied, "A dancer from Duanzhou. You know how to sing a tune, right?" Xiao Qie's gaze was so terrifying that it made one flustered. "Old dog Shen didn't teach you anything, but someone must have taught you something." Shen Zichuan lowered his head to evade his gaze, as if he was afraid of him. He said, "I don't know how to." "Lift your head." Xiao Qie pushed aside the lantern with his foot. "Or are you afraid of me?" Shen Zichuan could only raise his head. He caught a whiff of wine. Xiao Qie said, "It's fine if you don't want to sing. Find something for me." Shen Zichuan spread out his palms to show that he was still being chained. Xiao Qie frowned and said, "Just look for it like that." So Shen Zichuan squatted down and grabbed a few handfuls of snow. Xiao Qie stared coldly at the top of his head and said, "Stand up again." So Shen Zichuan propped himself up with his hands on his knees and stood up. Xiao Qie said, "You can squat down and up freely, and your legs are unaffected. Were the imperial bodyguards carrying out the floggings too considerate, or is a worthless life easier to sustain?" "Naturally, it's because a worthless life is easier to sustain," Shen Zichuan said in a muffled voice. "How lucky for me! That makes little sense." Xiao Qie pressed his whip against Shen Zichuan's chest. "That kick was meant to end this life. Your martial arts skills are pretty good." This whip gave Shen Zichuan the chills. He cowered from fear and said, "I'm just hanging on to my last breath. Second young master is righteous. Why make life difficult for a nobody like me? This matter has already come to such a point, and I've gotten what I deserve. Please let me off." Xiao Qie asked, "Do you truly mean that?" Shen Zichuan had already been reduced to sobs. He nodded his head vigorously. Xiao Qie retracted the whip and said, "You can say anything, but who knows whether or not they are true. How about this? Bark a few times like a dog. Once I'm satisfied, I'll let you off tonight." Shen Zichuan said nothing. The squad commander was scared witless by Xiao Qie's eyes and shoved Shen Zichuan a few times. The color drained from Shen Zichuan's face as he said timidly, "At least let me do it before you alone." "Scram." Xiao Qie kept it short and to the point. The squad commander instantly felt relieved and said joyously to Shen Zichuan, "Scram. Let's us scram now." Xiao Qie's cutting gaze fell upon the squad commander's face. The squad commander went weak in the knees. He pointed to himself and said, Me? Sure. Sure thing." Gritting his teeth, he curled up into a ball and rolled one a few rounds in the snow before standing a short distance away. Shen Zichuan coyly shifted a little closer and whispered into Xiao Qie's ear, "Even if you let me off, will I let you off?" Bits of snow suddenly flew up as Xiao Qie gripped Shen Zichuan's arm and pressed it down forcefully. With a sinister expression, he said, "Showing your true colors now, huh? I was wondering what's with this helpless and pitiful act you are putting on." Both men suddenly toppled over onto the snow. With his hands dangling from the handcuffs, Shen Zichuan kicked Xiao Qie in his lower abdomen and scrambled to prop himself up. "The imperial decree was for me to be confined. Yet the Xiao clan dares to defy the imperial edict to take my life. After tonight," Xiao Qie dragged Shen Zichuan towards him by his shackles. Shen Zichuan knocked hard against the ground and yelled through clenched teeth, "You are all the Xiao clan's accomplices in defying the imperial edict. My death is not to be regretted, but the imperial army will all die with me tonight." Xiao Qie clutched Shen Zichuan's throat from behind and forced him to raise his head. He gave a few short laughs and said harshly, "Do you think of yourself as a golden child? Die with you? Are you even worthy? Killing you is just like pulling weeds." Shen Zichuan's breathing was strained. He suddenly looped his shackles around the nape of Xiao Qie's neck and summoned all his strength to wrench the latter to the ground. Xiao Qie was caught unawares by this move. As he raised his arms, Shen Zichuan kicked him in the chest. Both men instantly tumbled upside down. "Kill me like pulling weeds?" Shun Zichuan bent his head and stared into Xiao Qia's eyes, finally meeting him eye to eye amidst the chaos. He said in a hoarse voice, "You've missed the opportunity. It remains to be seen who will be the hound and who will be the jade baby rabbit in time to come. Whoever dares to help you in secret." Xiao Qia's intent to kill had been ignited. "I'll kill one for every one of them I dig out." The squad commander was scared to death by this sudden change and rushed over to stop them. "Your Excellency! Your Excellency mustn't kill." "That's right," Shun Zichuan snapped. "The second young master wants to kill me tonight." "Shut your trap!" Xiao Qia made a sudden move to gag his mouth. Who would have known that Shun Zichuan would open his mouth to clamp his teeth down hard on him? He pressed down on half of Xiao Qia's body, having already bitten through the skin and flesh of the web between Xiao Qia's thumb and forefinger. Xiao Qia said in a cold voice, "Do you think you can cover it up by making a scene and acting shamelessly? Your martial arts prowess is by no means average." The squad commander could not stop them, and so he hurriedly called for help. "Pull him off, quick!" Blood was oozing out between Shun Zichuan's teeth, but still, he refused to let go. Xiao Qia had already sobered up by now. He grabbed and lifted Shun Zichuan by his back collar and flung him away. The pain in his perlicue was penetrating. Yet it was Shun Zichuan's eyes that were vividly seared into Xiao Qia's memory. "Young master!" Zhao Hui shouted on horseback. Xiao Qia turned his head and saw his elder brother on horseback too. The latter had already dismounted and was hurrying towards him. Right at that very instant, he felt ashamed. It was as if someone had peeled him bare of his skin and battered him back into his worthless original self. Xiao Jiming went down on one knee, and Shun Zichuan immediately let go. Xiao Qia's perlicue was badly mangled, and the teeth marks on it were deep. "Why did you fight?" Zhao Hui followed closely behind and saw his wound. "Lock him up," Xiao Jiming said in a deep voice. Zhao Hui picked Shun Zichuan up and headed inside. "The young master is drunk." Xiao Jiming looked at the squad commander and said, "Don't let what happened tonight get out. I will personally make an apology to His Majesty." The squad commander kowtowed to him several times and repeated, "I'll leave the arrangements to the hereditary prince." Xiao Jiming stood up. Zhao Hui had already thrown the man back into the temple. On seeing this, he said to the squad commander, "It has been hard on our Imperial Army brothers tonight in sending the young master back to the residence all safe and sound. It isn't easy to stand guard on a winter night. I'd like to invite all of you for a drink of hot wine. I hope the various gentlemen will not turn this invitation down." Not daring to say no, the squad commander tactfully agreed. Only then did Xiao Jiming look at Xiao Qia, although it was in wordless silence. Xiao Qia did not even wipe away the blood on his hand. He wanted to say something, but then he saw that his elder brother had already turned around to mount the horse. "Dage!" Xiao Qia called out to him in a mutter. Xiao Jiming heard him, but he spurred his horse on and left. Chapter 11. New Year. Chapter 11. New Year. Shun Zichuan's shackles were removed. He moved his wrists as he listened to the squad commander grumble on and on. Ji Gang pushed the wheelbarrow and swiftly finished unloading the wine for the Imperial Army. With a coarse cloth wrapped around his head, he shifted over to them. After ordering Ji Gang to finish tidying up the courtyard before spring, the squad commander went outside again to instruct the squad on guard duty that night not to spread word of the incident. "Are you hurt?" Ji Gang pulled Shun Zichuan's arm. "No." Shun Zichuan raised his hand to wipe the nape of his neck, where Xiao Qia had left strangulation marks. He called out, "Shifu." Ji Gang asked, "Where does it hurt?" Shun Zichuan shook his head. He considered it for a moment, then said, "His external martial arts one is strong and fierce, and his fists and kicks are powerful. It feels familiar to me." Ji Gang's burned and disfigured face looked astonished. He said, "Our Ji clan boxing style has never been imparted to outsiders. I didn't dare to counter his moves the moment he struck. The taste of blood seemed to linger in Shen Zichuan's mouth. He licked the edges of his teeth with the tip of his tongue and thought for a moment. He said, I was afraid he might get an inkling, so I did not dare to pull out all the stops. It's just that making a scene and playing dumb could not deceive him either. Shifu, why does he hate me so much? Teacher spoke of the current political situation. Aren't those relatives of the Empress Dowager with her at the lead the ones he should hate the most? That brat is drunk, Ji Gang said with loathing. And bullies always pick on the weak. So he could only turn to you. Shen Zichuan shook out his left hand. He was looking for this. Does Shifu recognize it? Lying quietly on his palm was that aged and worn-out bone thumb ring. Those with impressive arm strength in the army often use large bows and must wear these kinds of thumb rings when they are pulling the bowstring. Ji Gang scrutinized the thumb ring and said, This kind of wear and tear is most likely from drawing the Libe cavalry's great bow of heaven. However, this second young master Xiao is not heading into war. So what is he wearing this for? Xiao Qia slept in silence. It was Lu Guangbai who woke him up. You were really a piece of work last night. Lu Guangbai did not hold back. He sat on the chair and said, You have only just gotten a post, and you have already gone and looked for trouble. I just saw Jiming leaving the residence earlier to head for the palace. Xiao Qia's throat felt uncomfortable as he lay covered under the quilt. He said, I drank too much. In a few more days we will leave the capital. Lu Guangbai said in all earnestness. You can't continue drinking like this. What are you going to do if you drink until your martial arts skills are rendered useless and your body collapses? Xiao Qia did not reply. Lu Guangbai continued, They devastated your elder brother's heart at the banquet last night, so you should show him some understanding. He is busy with Libe's military affairs and, at the same time, concerned about your sister-in-law. And now he has to leave you behind here. He feels terrible. Yi, who doesn't speak highly of him before others. But all of them hope that he will never come back again every time he sets off for battle. For these people, he has to lead the troops to the battlefield year after year. He won't say it himself, but he's made of flesh and blood. So how would it not hurt him? Xiao Qia lifted the quilt and let out a long sigh. He said, Do I not understand all that you have said? What do you understand? Lu Guangbai threw the tangerine in his hand at Xiao Qia and said, If you understand, then get up and apologize to your eldest brother. Xiao Qia caught the tangerine and sat up. Lu Guangbai looked at the bandage wound on his hand and could not help but laugh. Sitting on the chair, he ate the tangerine and said, Why did you provoke him? You just had to go and get yourself bitten before you are satisfied. I told him to sing a tune. Xiao Qia said. But he said I wanted his life. How is this guy a pushover? You are no pushover either to start a fight with a confined prisoner on the street. Fortunately, Jiming reached in time. Otherwise, there will be another uproar in the city again today. Lu Guangbai asked, Are you badly hurt? Xiao Qia raised his hand for a look and said in irritation, He's born in the year of the dog. 2. Xiao Jiming came back only in the afternoon. Zhao Hui followed behind him and saw Xiao Qia waiting under the eave. Dage! Xiao Qia called out. Xiao Jiming took off his cloak, and Zhao Hui took it. The maidservant came over, carrying a copper basin in her hands. Xiao Jiming washed his hands and ignored him. Zhao Hui looked back at him and said, Young master, aren't you going for the Imperial Army investigation today? Go get the Viceroy Token 3 and come back for dinner tonight. Xiao Qia said, I'll go if my elder brother tells me to. Xiao Jiming wiped his hands and finally looked at him. He said, I didn't tell you to go last night, but you still went ahead, didn't you? Xiao Qia said, I ran in the wrong direction. I had meant to return home. Xiao Jiming placed the handkerchief back into the copper basin and said, Go get the token, then come back for your meal. Only then did Xiao Qia leave. Since the imperial army was dismissed from its duty of guarding the capital, the former office had fallen into a state of desolation. Xiao Qie spurred his horse over and saw several men in short jackets secured with waist sashes sitting around basking in the sun chatting. Their idle and lazy looks had none of the valor one would expect of an army. Xiao Qie dismounted his horse. Carrying his whip, he strode into the courtyard. There was a bald pine tree standing in the courtyard, with the accumulated snow casually shoved into a heap. No one removed the icicles hanging on the eaves of the veranda, and from the looks of it, the tiles on the rooftop were due for a retiling too. Welp, they were poor. Xiao Qie continued to scrutinize the surroundings. The paint was already peeling off the plaque. He went down several steps to the main hall. Then, lifting the curtain with his whip, he bent over slightly to enter. The men sitting around the stove cracking peanuts inside immediately turned their heads over to look at Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie laid down his horsewhip on the table and lifted over the chair to sit down without standing on ceremony. He said, "So, everyone's here." The people around him all stood up with a clatter, stepping noisily over those peanut shells under their feet. Most of them were over 40 years of age from old military households. Having muddled along in the imperial army for such a long time, they had no other capability to speak of, except for being adept at acting shamelessly to extort money. Seeing Xiao Qie now, their gazes sized him up and down before they exchanged sneaky looks at one another with ulterior motives in mind. "Second young master." One of them wiped his hands on his robe and said with a smile, "We have been waiting for you to collect the token today." Xiao Qie said, "I'm here now, no? Where's the token?" The man said smilingly, "We waited for you this morning, but you didn't come, and the Ministry of Works were urging us to get to work, so Assistant Commander Chow took the token first to deploy the men. He will be back late. Once he's back, I'll send someone to deliver it to your residence." Xiao Qie returned his smile and said, "And you are?" The man said, "Me? Just call me Lao Chen. For I used to be the company commander of Diqing's company. 5 Master Hua Shisan recommended me for a promotion, so here I am now in our imperial army." "That's weird." With one hand on the chair's handle, Xiao Qie leaned his body to the side and looked at Lao Chen. Right below the viceroy should be the Imperial Guard's regional vice commander. How did it end up in the hands of an assistant commander? You aren't aware of it, but... When Lao Chen saw Xiao Qie listening attentively, his body, which had been bent over in a bow, straightened up imprudently. The Zhongbu's troops were defeated last year, and the grains from Jincheng could not be shipped over. That led to an emergency of food shortage in Kudu. The bureaucrats from the Ministry of Personnel could not afford to pay out yearly salary, and so they cut the staff in the Imperial Army Office by half. At present, we do not have a vice commander. The closest is Assistant Commander Chow. All that's left are just the few of us. "So you're saying," Xiao Qie said, "anyone can get their hands on the Viceroy's waste token? Our usual practice in the past was to just take the token and go. The Ministry of Works' tasks can't wait, and it's all lifting lumber to the palace. We are in a humble position, and our words carry little weight. We can't afford to offend anyone. We don't have a choice." Lao Chen started pinning the blame. "If you think this is against the rules, you have to make it clear to the Ministry of Works. I'm a legitimate viceroy with a token of authority." Xiao Qie said, "Why do I have to explain myself to the Ministry of Works? The one in command above the Imperial Army is the Emperor. It was on account of camaraderie that the Imperial Army helped the 6 ministries 6 out in the past without settling accounts with them when they wanted our help. But whoever wants manpower from today onwards, if they can't give a proper explanation of the tasks involved and a clear accounting of the schedules, then they better not count on the deployment of my men." "You can say anything you want." Lao Chen and the others began laughing. He said, however, "We aren't in charge of patrols and defenses now. We are errand runners and odd-job laborers. We could still prove ourselves useful by helping out at the 6 ministries. Besides, His Majesty the Emperor had never said a word about this over the past few years. Second young master, having money in your pocket is not as good as having friends in the imperial court. You lived in Libe in the past, but the situation of the imperial army differs from the armored cavalry of Libe. Some things simply won't work here. Moreover, our imperial army is no match for the 8 great training divisions. Who? Xiao Qie stood up and said, "Who did you say recommended you for a post here?" Lao Chen's expression glowed as he straightened his back. How he itched to repeat it out loud thrice. "Master Hua Shi-san. You know him too? He's the Empress Dowager's grandson of common birth. He's third Missy Hua's." With a lift of his foot, Xiao Qie gave him a kick. Lao Chen was still speaking with a glowing face, and the kick caught him off guard and sent him toppling over and crashing into the table and chair. The teapot smashed onto the ground, splashing tea all over the floor. It startled Lao Chen back to his senses, and he trembled as he crawled and kneeled on the ground. The loafer raised by a concubine from the Hua clan. Xiao Qie swept aside the peanut shells on the table. "He used to carry my boots in the past. What kind of influential backer do you think he is? At best, he's just a small potato. I want the Viceroy's token of authority. Instead, you tell me the rules. Are you so blinded that you can't even tell who I am? From now on, I'm the one who has the final say in the Imperial Army." Lao Chen propped himself up with his hands and kowtowed to him. Having received a rude awakening, he hurriedly said, second young master. Who the fuck is your second young master?" Xiao Qie's eyes were piercingly cold. "As the Imperial Army Viceroy, I'm your master who is in control of your life. Putting on airs before me and pretending to be some local ruffian? The Ministry of Works needs manpower for manual labor, and the men deployed are all from the Imperial Army. If there were no money exchanging hands in between, then would you have found it worthwhile for you to throw yourselves at their feet? Everyone at the bottom is working themselves to their deaths, but you sure have kept yourself fat without lifting a finger. What? Hua Shi-san said he would protect you, and you really think of yourself as having the death exemption golden token 7 in your possession? I wouldn't dare. Lao Chen shuffled a few steps on his knees and said, "Your Excellency, this humble servant was spouting nonsense. Half an hour." 8 Xiao Qie said. "Authority token, register of names, and 20,000 soldiers. I want to check them all. It's fine if one is missing, you gentlemen can just substitute it with your heads." Lao Chen hurriedly rose to his feet and dashed out. The various generals left the capital a few days later. Emperor Xiande led hundreds of officials to send off Xiao Jiming. He coughed intermittently as he held Xiao Jiming by the arms in the heavy snow. Jiming. Emperor Xiande was wrapped in a cloak, and yet he was still frightfully skinny. He said, "We can only meet again next year once you leave today. It has been restless over at the Libe frontier. Although the Biancha cavalry had beaten a withdrawal, they still refused to bow and submit to us. The rapacious ambitions of the 12 tribes are crystal clear for all to see. You are my trusted official, and also a valiant general of Dajo. You must be cautious in everything you do. We came to your Majesty's rescue late this time, and yet your Majesty still showed favor to us. Both father and this humble servant feel stricken. As long as your Majesty gives the command in the future, Libe will surely risk life and limb for your Majesty." Xiao Jiming said, "Ever since your father fell ill, he has not met with me for many years." Emperor Xiande slowly turned his head back and gazed at masses of human heads within the city gates. Then he looked at the magnificent palace that had towered over Kudu for 100 years. He said softly, "I've let all the loyal soldiers who have lost their lives on the battlefield down with the way the matter of the surviving member of the Shun clan played out. But I have been on my sickbed for such a long time, and there are too many matters where my hands are tied." Xiao Jiming followed his gaze. After a while, he said, the wind and snow are raging in Kudu. Your Majesty, please take care of your health. Emperor Xianda slowly released his grip on Xiao Jiming's hand and said, my good son, go. Lu Guangbai spurred the horse out of the city. As expected, he saw Xiao Qie waiting alone at the pavilion at the foot of the mountain. He remained on his horse as he whistled at Xiao Qie from afar and said, Brat, we are leaving. Xiao Qie led the horse and said, storms are rife in the martial fraternity. A vessel dreads its captain abandoning ship. 9 You must be careful. Just say it if you have something to say. Why recite a poem? Lu Guangbai laughed heartily. Just wait. You will eventually be able to return home one day. That depends on fate. Xiao Qie smiled too. The sound of horse hooves rang out behind them. Lu Guangbai looked back. The horse rider coming towards them in the snow was dressed in a simple old robe and had black hair tied up in a high ponytail. Lu Guangbai quickly turned his horse around and shouted, Commander-in-Chief, let's leave together. Qi Juin slowed down. She was dressed light in an overcoat and an old outer robe while carrying a long sword on her back. If one were to look at just her appearance, then she could have been merely an ordinary woman in the martial fraternity. It was only after the wind passed that her face crystallized into a surprisingly lovely face. That horse of yours is second-rate. She raised her eyebrows and smiled, instantly showing her might. It can't catch up with mine, can it? But Lu Guangbai liked it. He said, it isn't as agile and brave as the commander-in-chief's steed, but it's a good boy that has survived the battlefield. Let's have a race, and we'll find out if it can keep up or not. Now, that one over there looks rare to me. Qi Juin raised her chin at Xiao Qie. Swap with me. Xiao Qie stroked his steed's mane and said, no, thanks. No matter how I look at it, I'm the one losing out. Qi Juin raised her hand and threw an object to Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie caught it with both arms. It was an unusually heavy executioner's blade 10 still in its sheath. Before the new year, Li Bei raised a batch of fine battle steeds for Qidong, and the credits go to you. That thing was forged by the best craftsmen in my account books. It cost me a lot of precious materials. Qi Juin said, how about it? Not losing out now, huh? Xiao Qie weighed it in his hands and laughed. He said, Commander-in-Chief, from now on, you're my dear Jiejie. The blade I've brought from home might be good, but it's too light. It's not as smooth to wield as this one. Qi Juin said, Jiejie? Wait till you unsheathed the blade, and you'll be calling me Ye. Xiao Qie asked, has this blade been given a name? I did think of one. Qi Juin said, he who speaks of the ruthlessness of the wolf is himself insatiable and ruthless. 11 Isn't that just perfect for you? But Lu Guangbai said, the word ruthlessness is a little too fierce. He's just fierce. Qi Juin flung the horsewhip out with a crack, and the steed under her saddle instantly galloped away. Without looking back, she said, what you'd want for a man of Li Bei is precisely for him to be fierce. The main army on the other side had already started moving. The red tassels 12 from the sea of spears of the Qidong garrison troops followed closely behind Qi Juin and surged towards the wilderness in the east. Lu Guangbai did not linger. He waved his hand at Xiao Qie, then spurred his horse on to catch up with them. The next moment, Xiao Qie could hear the armored cavalry stomping across the ground. It almost seemed as if the earth beneath his feet was quaking slightly. Xiao Qie looked out into the distance and saw his eldest brother in the lead. Like a wave of black tide, the familiar armored cavalry of Li Bei swept across the snowy plains and galloped north. The gerfalcon broke through the wind to chase after them. It hovered in the air over the armored cavalry of Li Bei and screeched. Xiao Qie stood clenching his blade, watching on as the armored cavalry of Li Bei vanished amidst the boundless sea of snow. Shun Zichuan's mind was wandering, and Grand Mentor Qi knocked him back to his senses. Now that the various generals have returned to their positions, Kudu has once again lapsed back into a stage of impasse. With his hair all disheveled, Grand Mentor Qi craned his neck and looked at Shen Zichuan. You don't have much time. You can't keep on being willing to remain a trapped turtle in a jar. 13. They are the butcher knife, and I'm the meat on their chopping board. 14. Shen Zichuan looked up and said, Teacher, do I really still have a chance to leave this place? Fortune and misfortune are interdependent. Being confined is not necessarily a bad thing. Grand Mentor Qi opened the gourd stopper and took a few gulps of wine. It's easier to lay low and bide your time if you remain behind closed doors. You will have plenty of opportunities in the future. The palace bell tolled in the distance. The new year had begun. Chapter 12. Dragon Boat Festival. Chapter 12. Dragon Boat Festival, 8th year of Xianda. One midsummer. The round-collared robe of the Secretary of the Ministry of Revenue, Wang Xian, was drenched in sweat. He sat uncomfortably on the chair, as if he was sitting on pins and needles. It was not the first time he raised his wuxia hat to wipe his sweat. Your Excellency Xiao. Wang Xian hemmed and hawed. It's not that the Ministry of Revenue doesn't want to allocate the funds to you. It's just that the expenditure of the Treasury has yet to be tallied, and Pan Gongong up there has not given his endorsement. There's really no way we can allocate you the sum. It takes time to work out the accounts. Xiao Qia held up the teacup to take a few sips. Am I not waiting here now? Take your time. Wang Xian's throat throbbed. He looked at Xiao Qia, who was as cool as a cucumber, and at the Imperial Army standing still on the veranda outside. Your Excellency, Wang Xian said almost pleadingly. The weather is hot and I feel really bad to let the soldiers stand outside. Let me invite the various gentlemen for some cold drink. The ice in reserves. We have not made any contribution to deserve it. Xiao Qia smiled superficially. Our Imperial Army are sturdy and burly men who deal with manual labor. So what's the harm in standing for a few hours? Pay it no mind, Your Excellency. Focus on your accounting. Wang Xian grasped the account book. For a long time, he could not bring himself to lower the brush. That had been the beginning of spring, and the Emperor was seriously ill. For this reason, the Empress Dowager instructed men to carry out large-scale construction in the palace to build a temple so that she could chant the scriptures to accumulate blessings for him. The Ministry of Works, having received this assignment, had to receive large quantities of lumber from Duanzhou. To save money, they ordered the Imperial Army to transport them. The Imperial Army transported the lumber into Kudu, but the Empress Dowager withdrew her plan to build the temple upon receiving Secretariat Elder Hai's memorial against it. The Ministry of Works was thus short of this sum of money on hand. For 2 months they had dragged this matter on, delaying settlement of payment to the Imperial Army. Money was in short supply. If this had been a time where the state treasury was full, then this matter would not have been an issue at all. Who would be willing to offend second young Master Xiao for such a small sum? But right now, the Ministry of Revenue was suffering themselves. Last year, they had spent almost $1 million for the Empress Dowager's birthday just by hosting the banquet and giving out monetary rewards alone. Wang Xian set aside his brush. He might as well stick his neck out. He said, Your Excellency, there's no way the money can be settled now. To tell you frankly, the expenditure at the end of the year doesn't match up to our budget going by the current accounting. Even our salaries might not necessarily get paid out. We really have no money. Even if you give me, Wang Shouqing, for a stab today, there's still nothing I can do. The salaries and provisions of the 8 great training divisions are paid out as usual without delay. But when it comes to our Imperial Army, you are always desperately broke. We are all officials serving the Emperor. It serves me, Xiao Suan, 5 right to be so lowly that all I can do is to hold on to this debt and wait for you guys to have enough money to pay us. Xiao Qia threw the teacup onto the table with a clatter. The Ministry of Revenue cries about being poor every year. But what has it got to do with me? Pay up and we'll work. It's all down in black and white. Once we are done with our tasks, you have to settle the payment. Don't talk to me about anything else, those aren't my responsibility. If all the problems of the Ministry of Revenue have to bank on the understanding of others, then what else is there for you people to do? Vacate the position earlier and let someone else take over. His words turned Wang Xian's expression livid. Wang Xian stood up and said, "Since we are all serving the Emperor, then why does Your Excellency have to push us into such a tight corner? Who would be unwilling to settle the payment if we have the money? If the Imperial Army is so capable, then why do manual labor? Go serve as the 8 great training divisions too. We'll see who would still not dare to pay up." Just as the atmosphere was hostile between both parties, a man outside the room lifted his robe and strode in. "There's no need for Your Excellency Wang to get angry. The second young master is just being a forthright man speaking his mind." He took off his Zhejiang hat, wiped his hands with a handkerchief, and said, "This humble one is the Chief Supervising Secretary from the Office of Scrutiny for Revenue, 7 Shuexiuzhua. I'm here regarding this account." The Chief Supervising Secretary of the Office of Scrutiny for Revenue was merely a 7th grade 8 position. By all reasonings, it would not even be considered an official in Kudu. But it was special. Not only could he supervise the work progresses of the various ministries in Yamen, he could also participate in the reviews and appraisals of the officials' virtuous achievements that took place every 6 years at Kudu's Chief Surveillance Bureau. 9. Furthermore, he could sidestep the 6 ministries to submit a memorial directly to the Emperor himself. Wang Xian could not afford to offend him, so he swallowed his anger and rolled along with it. He said, "How would I dare to get angry? The Imperial Army has done so much. I myself wouldn't want His Excellency Shao to have worked for nothing. But Yanqing, take a look at this account. The Ministry of Revenue can't afford the funds at all." Shuexiuzhua's courtesy name 10 was Yanqing, and he looked particularly scholarly and refined. Without looking at the accounts, he said to both men, "I'm aware of the Ministry of Revenue's difficulties. Second young master, how about this? Quanqing supplied us with a batch of silk a few days back. We'll have it converted into cash and settle your account with the same number of silk. Does that work for you?" As soon as Shao Qia left, Wang Xian's expression turned cold. He said to Shuexiuzhua, "Is he even asking money for the Imperial Army? More like he's taking it for himself to squander away." Ever since this second young master took up the post of Imperial Army Viceroy, he has been leading a life of debauchery all day long. Every time, he coerces us into a corner. He's not in the least bit sympathetic. Shuexiuzhua smiled and said nothing to continue the conversation. Shao Qia left the Ministry of Revenue office and mounted his horse to head for Donglong Street. He was obviously taller than he was 5 years ago, and the drive and vigor that could be seen in him in the past has diminished some. Prince Chu Li Jianheng had been waiting for him an entire morning. On seeing him, he hurriedly said, "Where the heck have you been? The anxiety is killing me." "Fooling around." Shao Qia sat down and gulped down the cold drink. On seeing the basin of ice in the inner part of the room, he stretched out his limbs and lay down on the arhat bed. 11. He said, "This is so comfortable. It's so hot outside it makes my head spin. I'm going to sleep for a while." "That won't do." Li Jianheng waved his mozo bamboo fan vigorously. With his clothes spread open, he sighed. "Wait for me to finish saying my piece before you sleep." Shao Qia had been up to something at night, and so he was unbearably tired and sleepy at the moment. He let out an absent-minded "hmm." Li Jianheng took a sip of the iced wine with his pampered, delicate hands and said, "Do you still remember that woman I told you about the last time? It's the one I kept 5 years ago in my manor, and was prepared to take her as mine. But that son of a bitch, Xiaofuzi, took her to give 12 to Pan Rugi, that castrated bastard." Shao Qia uttered an "oh." Li Jianheng said with even more gusto, "A few days ago, I went away to avoid the summer heat and saw her again around the manor. That little lady has kept herself so smooth and tender. She looks even more lovely than she was 5 years ago. My heart goes into overdrive just by looking at her. How I hate those eunuchs. Thieving son of a bitch wrestled away my love by force and broke up a potentially good marriage. He thinks that's the end of it? No. Xiao Qie yawned. Li Jianheng fumed. Are you my buddy or not? You have to help me think of a way to fix him. We can't touch Pan Rugi, but Xiaofuzi needs a thrashing. Xiao Qie was truly tired. He said, how? Drag him out of the palace? Li Jianheng pushed aside the delicate concubine waiting on him and shut his fan. He said, the Dragon Boat Festival 13 is around the corner. His Majesty wants to go to Xiuan 14 to watch the dragon boat race. When the time comes, Pan Rugi will no doubt go along. If he follows, so will Xiaofuzi. When the directorate of the imperial stables are racing horses, we can lure him out and beat him to death. Xiao Qie seemed to be asleep. Seeing his silence, Li Jianheng said, Suan, are you listening? It won't do to beat him to death. Xiao Qie said with his eyes shut. If Pan Rugi comes to hate you because of this, all you'll be having in the future is trouble. Resentful, Li Jianheng said, then we can at least give him a beating, right? If I don't vent this anger, I won't even be able to eat. That said, what's up with you lately? You always look exhausted. What have you been doing at night? Why did you send away the virgin I picked for you the last time? Xiao Qie said nothing more as he waved his hand to indicate his awareness of Li Jianheng's words. There was no bone thumb ring on his thumb, but the teeth marks on the web between the thumb and forefinger had left scars. Li Jianheng went on to speak about something else, but Xiao Qie turned a deaf ear to it all. It was the Dragon Boat Festival a few days later. Emperor Xianda, who had not held court sessions for a long time, braced his sickly body and moved to Xiuan in an imperial carriage. The imperial concubines accompanying him all donned muslin clothes, while Ji Lei and the commander-in-chief of the 8 great training divisions, Shi Guan, escorted the emperor. The imperial army had free time, so they summoned Xiao Qie over as well. By the time Xiao Qie arrived, it was already full of people. Emperor Xianda finished sticking in the Willow 15 and was waiting for the directorate of the imperial stables to start the horse race. The court of imperial entertainments, which was also part of the retinue, served sticky rice dumplings 16 and pastries near the seat. Li Jianheng stayed on the prince's seat and waved his hand at Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie threw his horsewhip to Chen Yang behind him and entered his seat while undoing his arm guards. 17 still weighing the bamboo fan in his hands today, Li Jianheng said, Why are you here only now? The anxiety is killing me. Xiao Qie said, You're anxious every day. Are you really all right? Li Jianheng fanned himself and said, I'm just used to saying it. Look, see that? Xiaofuzi is serving over there. Xiao Qie looked and saw Xiaofuzi beaming as he spoke beside Pan Rugi's ear. He said, Don't charge up later. Just get someone to beat him up. An hour later, Xiaofuzi stepped at the edge of the latrine pit. He was preparing to relieve himself when everything went black before his eyes as someone threw a sack over him. Xiaofuzi shrieked, wanting to shout, but someone dealt him a punch so hard that he saw stars. On seeing the sack, Li Jianheng lifted his robe without demur and kicked him. Xiaofuzi, covered with the sack and gagged, groaned in pain as he writhed on the ground. The race ahead was at its most crucial juncture right this moment, so no one heard the sounds. They beat up Xiaofuzi for a little less than an hour, but before Li Jianheng could vent all his pent-up anger, Chen Yang stopped him. Chen Yang shot a glance at the guards from the prince's residence behind him, and they quickly lifted the sack and darted off. Your Highness, Chen Yang said, he will die if you continue beating him. Perhaps next time. Li Jianheng pulled on his robe to adjust it. He took 2 looks at Chen Yang and asked, Where are you going to throw him? The Viceroy has ordered us to throw him in the woods beside the lake. Once the banquet starts later, all the serving eunuchs will pass by, and he will then be freed of his bindings. Li Jianheng spat at the spot where Xiaofuzi had rolled about earlier and returned to his seat. By the time the banquet started, Li Jianheng had already forgotten all about him. Xiao Qie kept his eyes open as he looked over at Pan Rugi, but he did not see any signs of Xiaofuzi. Li Jianheng picked up the dishes with his chopsticks and said, "Most probably, he found it humiliating and ran back to change his clothes. Eunuchs like them who serve the emperor fear getting dirty and disdained by their master the most. Do you want to go to my manor a few days later for some fun? I can let you see the little lady too." Xiao Qie drank the cold tea and said, "I'm busy." Li Jianheng let out a "heh" and said, "You still want to put on an act before me? You busy? The imperial army is almost on the verge of getting disbanded. What's there to be busy with in such an idle position?" "Busy drinking." Xiao Qie laughed too. Those eyes of his stared at the tea in his hand. His side profile looked a tad flippant. "Once autumn arrives, it'll be the inspection. It's only by treating others to some wine that I can secure this idle position." Being human, Li Jianheng pointed at him with his chopsticks and said, "Is to treat yourself as if you are living a life of luxury and to live life as if you are whiling the time away. What did they say about the Pan Rugi and those relatives of the Empress Dowager? Aren't they tired of fighting one another to the death? What's the joy in that?" "Yeah." Xiao Qie's smile grew wicked. "Isn't that just making yourself more stressed and vexed? Having fun is still the most gratifying." Li Jianheng looked at that gaze of his and smiled too. He said, "So what's with the censorate? Who dares to deny my buddy his post? You were personally appointed by His Majesty. We are loafing around on imperial orders. How about this? Before autumn, I'll host a flower appreciation feast at my residence. You go ahead and invite them all. No hurry." Xiao Qie surveyed Xiuan and saw the hall of Zhao Zui Temple at the corner of the rising and falling tiers of eaves. He frowned and said, "This place is pretty near to Zhao Zui Temple. You're still thinking about it, huh?" Li Jianheng said, "That thumb ring has been lost for so long." Xiao Qie stroked his thumb out of habit. "That last member of the Shun clan has been locked up for 5 years, and there has been no news of him. His Majesty has never even asked if he has died or gone insane." Li Jianheng said, "If the one imprisoned inside was me, I'd have gone crazy in just half a month, let alone 5 years." Xiao Qie's perlicue ached. He had no wish to bring up that man. Just then, the sound of drums rose by the side of the lake. Li Jianheng threw aside his chopsticks and rose to his feet to urge him on. "Let's go. The dragon boat race. They are certain to bet money on it." Xiao Qie was about to get up, but then he saw Ji Lei hurried his way through the crowd and leaned over to Pan Rugi to say something to him. Pan Rugi suddenly turned his head over for a fleeting instant, and then he slapped down heavily on the table. Xiao Qie immediately looked at Chen Yang behind him. Stunned, Chen Yang said, "Vice, Your Majesty." Ji Lei was already kneeling before the emperor. He spoke in a clear voice. "I'm afraid it's not possible to go ahead with the dragon boat race. This humble subject led the imperial guards on patrol earlier, and we unexpectedly fished out Xiaofuzi, who was on duty in the imperial palace, from the water." Emperor Xianda coughed violently and Pan Rugi stepped forward to stroke his back. It was only when Emperor Xianda's coughing eased a little that he asked, "What is he doing in the water?" Ji Lei raised his head. One could not tell if he was looking at Emperor Xianda or the Empress Dowager. He said in a heavy voice, "He drowned." A commotion rose from the entire seat of imperial concubines as they used their silk handkerchiefs to cover their mouths. All at once, Li Jianheng knocked over the teacup on the table. He picked it up in a panic and looked at Xiao Qie. "I was merely just saying,"